It was pouring rain, and a struggling single dad just wanted to get home. But then he saw her, a little girl, shivering, clutching a stuffed rabbit, and crying alone. He thought he was saving her from the cold. But minutes later, a black car screeched up, and everything changed. She wasn't just a lost little girl, she was the heir to an empire. And his one small act of kindness was about to pull him into a world of money, power, and dangerous family secrets. When the truth about her life starts to unravel, he'll have to choose walk away or fight for the only person who's ever made him feel like a hero again. But why was she alone at that bus stop? And what will he risk when helping her could cost him everything? The steady drumbeat of rain echoed through the empty streets of Willow Creek as Jack Harmon pulled down the heavy metal door of his repair shop. The worn sign above read, "Harmon's Auto Repair," in faded blue letters, barely visible in the dim glow of the street lamp. His shoulders ached from a long day, bent over engines and transmissions, but bills didn't pay themselves. He fished out his old umbrella from behind the driver's seat of his pickup truck. The black fabric was frayed at the edges, but it still did its job. The umbrella sprung open with a soft click as Jack stepped into the downpour, his work boots splashing through growing puddles on the cracked pavement. The clock on his dashboard read 9:47 p.m. when he finally settled into the driver's seat. Sam would be worried. He'd promised to be home by 9. His 11-year-old was too young to be shouldering such adult concerns, but since losing Sarah 3 years ago, their roles had sometimes blurred. Jack cranked the heat and pulled away from the curb, windshield wipers working overtime against the deluge. 3 blocks from home, something caught his eye. A small figure huddled beneath the bus shelter, barely visible through the rain-streaked window. Jack slowed his truck, squinting through the darkness. No buses ran this late, not in Willow Creek. As he drew closer, his heart dropped. It was a child, alone in this weather. Without hesitation, Jack pulled over, leaving his headlights on to illuminate the shelter. He grabbed his umbrella and stepped out into the rain. The figure didn't move as he approached, but he could see now it was a little girl, probably no older than 8. She wore a school uniform, a pleated skirt and cardigan, both completely soaked through. In her arms, she clutched a bedraggled stuffed rabbit, its floppy ears dripping water. Jack approached slowly, not wanting to frighten her. He crouched down to her eye level, keeping a respectful distance. "Hey there," he said softly, trying to project warmth through his concern. "Are you okay? It's awful weather to be out here alone." The girl's eyes darted to his face, then away again. She hugged her rabbit tighter but remained silent. Even in the dim light, Jack could see she was shivering violently. "I'm Jack," he continued gently. "I have a son about your age. There's a diner just down the street, warm and dry, with good hot chocolate. Would you like to get out of this rain?" She looked at him again, longer this time, as if weighing his sincerity. Water dripped from her dark hair, plastered to her face. After what seemed like an eternity, she gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Here," Jack said, holding out his umbrella. "Let's get you somewhere warm." The girl stood on shaky legs, still clutching her rabbit. Jack noticed she was wearing patent leather shoes, now scuffed and waterlogged. He held the umbrella over her as they walked to his truck, making sure she was completely covered even if it meant his own shoulder getting wet. He opened the passenger door and helped her climb in, cranking up the heat even higher. The drive to Joe's Diner took less than 2 minutes, but Jack kept glancing over, worried about how badly she was shivering. The girl stared straight ahead, her small hands never loosening their grip on the stuffed animal. The diner's neon sign cast a warm glow through the rain, the word "open" buzzing in red. Inside, the fluorescent lights were almost too bright after the darkness outside. Sally, the night waitress, looked up from wiping down the counter, her eyebrows rising at the sight of them. "Booth or counter?" Jack asked softly. The girl pointed to a booth by the window, as far from the counter as possible. Jack nodded and followed her lead. She slid into the vinyl seat, leaving small puddles where she sat. Her uniform was expensive, Jack noticed. The kind you'd see at private schools, not the public school Sam attended. The rabbit she held was also clearly well made, though currently worse for wear. Sally approached with menus, but Jack waved them away. "Hot chocolate and a grilled cheese sandwich, please." He glanced at the girl. "Does that sound good?" Another tiny nod. "Coming right up," Sally said, her usual chattiness subdued by the unusual situation. They sat in silence for a few moments, watching the rain streak down the diner windows. The girl's shivering had started to subside in the warm air, but she looked so small and lost that Jack's heart ached. "I'm going to need to call someone," he said gently, "to help find your family. They must be very worried about you." The girl's fingers tightened on her rabbit, but she didn't respond. "Can you tell me your name?" Jack tried again, keeping his voice soft and steady. A long pause followed, broken only by the quiet clinking of dishes from the kitchen and the patter of rain against glass. Finally, in a whisper so faint he almost missed it, she spoke. "Emily." "Emily," Jack repeated warmly. "That's a beautiful name." Sally returned with the hot chocolate, topped with a generous swirl of whipped cream. She set it down carefully in front of Emily, along with a handful of extra napkins. "The grilled cheese will be ready in a few minutes," Sally said, then retreated tactfully. Emily stared at the hot chocolate, then slowly reached out one hand to wrap around the warm mug, the other still holding her rabbit. A tiny bit of tension seemed to leave her shoulders as the warmth seeped into her cold fingers. "Take small sips," Jack advised. "It's pretty hot." Emily lifted the mug carefully, leaving a perfect whipped cream mustache after her first tentative sip. For just a moment, a ghost of a smile flickered across her face as she wiped it away with a napkin. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, but here in the warm light of the diner, with the promise of hot food and gentle conversation, the storm seemed less threatening. Jack watched as Emily took another sip of hot chocolate, noting how her hands had finally stopped trembling. Whatever had brought her to that bus stop on this rainy night, at least for now, she was safe. Emily wrapped her small hands around the warm mug, taking another careful sip of hot chocolate. The grilled cheese arrived, steam rising from the perfectly toasted bread. Jack noticed how her eyes widened at the sight of food, though she hesitated before reaching for it. "It's okay," he encouraged. "You must be hungry after being out in that rain." She picked up half the sandwich and took a tiny bite. After chewing thoughtfully, she took a bigger one, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "My nanny was supposed to pick me up," Emily said quietly, her voice barely audible above the patter of rain against the windows. "After ballet class." Jack leaned forward slightly, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "What time was she supposed to meet you?" 6 o'clock. Emily's lower lip trembled. "I waited and waited. She never came." Jack glanced at his watch. Nearly 10:30 p.m. now. His stomach tightened at the thought of this little girl waiting alone for over 4 hours. "Does this happen often?" he asked gently. Emily shrugged, picking at the crust of her sandwich. "Sometimes she forgets, or says she got busy." She hugged her rabbit closer. "But never this late before." "What's your rabbit's name?" Jack asked, trying to keep her comfortable while figuring out what to do next. "Mr. Hopsworth," Emily replied, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. "He's very proper. See his bow tie?" Jack nodded seriously at the sodden velvet bow around the rabbit's neck. "Very distinguished." Sally approached with fresh hot chocolate, giving Jack a meaningful look. He understood. They needed to contact the authorities. "Emily," he said carefully, "I need to make a phone call to some people who can help us find your family. Is that okay?" Fear flickered across her face. Are they going to be mad?" "No, sweetheart. They just want to make sure you're safe." Jack stood slowly. "I'll be right over there at the counter, where you can see me the whole time. Would you like Sally to sit with you?" Emily nodded, clutching Mr. Hopsworth tighter. Sally slid into the booth with a warm smile as Jack walked to the counter. He kept his voice low as he dialed the police, explaining the situation to the dispatcher. They promised to send someone right away. Before he could return to the booth, headlights swept across the diner's windows as a sleek black town car pulled up outside. The vehicle looked startlingly out of place in this modest neighborhood, a luxury model that probably cost more than Jack's house. A man in an impeccable uniform burst through the door, rain dripping from his cap. His eyes darted around the diner before landing on Emily. "Miss Emily!" he exclaimed, relief and anxiety warring in his voice. "Thank heavens!" Emily shrank back in her seat, pressing against the window. The chauffeur approached their booth, his polished shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. "We've been searching everywhere for you, Miss Emily. Your grandmother is beside herself with worry." Jack stepped forward protectively, noting Emily's discomfort. "I'm Jack Harmon. I found her at the bus stop about an hour ago." The chauffeur turned to him, taking in Jack's work clothes and grease-stained hands. "Thomas Burke, the Wexler family chauffeur." "I cannot thank you enough, sir." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather wallet. "Please, allow me to compensate you for your trouble." "That won't be necessary," Jack said firmly, holding up a hand. "I'm just glad she's safe." Thomas insisted, trying to press several crisp bills into Jack's hand. "Sir, I must insist. The family would want—" "No thank you," Jack repeated, stepping back. "Really." Emily slid out of the booth, moving to stand beside Jack. Her small hand found his, fingers cold, despite the hot chocolate. Thomas noticed the gesture, his expression tightening slightly. "Come along, Miss Emily. Your grandmother is waiting." He held out his hand, but Emily didn't move. "Can't Jack take me home?" she asked in a small voice. Thomas shook his head. "I'm afraid not, Miss Emily. You know the rules about strangers." "But he's not a stranger," Emily protested. "He's nice. He bought me hot chocolate and grilled cheese, and he didn't even want money." "Nevertheless," Thomas said firmly, "we must go. Now." Jack knelt down to Emily's eye level, gently disentangling his hand from hers. "It's okay, Emily. You should go home to your family. They've been worried about you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She threw her arms around Jack's neck, surprising him with the force of her embrace. Her wet hair pressed against his cheek as she whispered, "I wish you were my daddy." The words hit Jack like a physical blow, stirring memories of Sam at that age, dealing with the loss of his mother. Before he could respond, Thomas was there, gently but firmly guiding Emily toward the door. Jack watched as Thomas opened an umbrella over Emily, hurrying her to the waiting car. Through the rain-streaked windows, he caught a final glimpse of her small face, looking back at him. Mr. Hopsworth clutched tight against her chest before the car pulled away into the rainy night. Sally appeared beside him, shaking her head. "Poor little thing." "Yeah," Jack agreed softly, still staring at the place where the car had disappeared. Emily's whispered words echoed in his mind, stirring something protective and painful in his chest. The police arrived 5 minutes later, but there was little to report. The incident was logged, and Jack gave his statement. But it was clear the case was closed. Emily was safely back with her family, whoever they were. Yet as Jack finally drove home through the rain, he couldn't shake the image of Emily's face pressed against that car window, or forget the desperate wish she'd whispered in his ear. He had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed in this small town. Sam was waiting up for him, despite it being well past his bedtime. "Dad, where were you? I was worried." Jack pulled his son into a tight hug, grateful for the simple warmth of family. "Sorry, buddy. Something came up, but I'm home now." Later, lying in bed, Jack stared at the ceiling while rain drummed against the roof. Emily's words kept playing in his mind. "I wish you were my daddy." Such a simple phrase, but heavy with longing and trust that he hadn't earned. He wondered about her home life, about what would make a child that age wish for a stranger to be her father. Finally, Jack rolled over and closed his eyes, pushing away thoughts of lost little girls and expensive black cars. He had his own child to worry about, his own struggles to face. Whatever Emily's story was, it wasn't his to solve. But somewhere in the rain-soaked night, he knew a little girl was holding a damp stuffed rabbit named Mr. Hopsworth, and he hoped she was truly safe and warm. The morning sun filtered through the worn curtains of the Harmon kitchen as Jack flipped another pancake on the griddle. The familiar sizzle and sweet aroma filled their modest home, a Saturday morning ritual he'd maintained since Sarah passed. The kitchen, like the rest of their small house, was dated but clean, with cheerful yellow walls Sarah had painted years ago. Sam slouched into the kitchen, his dark hair sticking up in all directions. At 11 he was already showing signs of the teenager he'd soon become, though sleep still softened his features. He slid onto one of the mismatched chairs at their scratched wooden table, stifling a yawn. "Morning, Dad," Sam mumbled, reaching for the orange juice. "Is it true you rescued someone last night?" Jack raised an eyebrow as he slid 3 golden brown pancakes onto Sam's plate. "Where'd you hear that?" "Mrs. Peterson called this morning while you were in the shower." Sam drowned his pancakes in maple syrup. "She said her daughter works at Jerry's Diner and told her all about it. Said you brought in a lost little girl." Jack sighed, settling into his chair with his own plate. Trust small-town gossip to travel at light speed. "I just helped someone who needed it, Bud. Nothing heroic about it." "Was she really rich?" Sam pressed between bites. "Katie, Mrs. Peterson's daughter," said the chauffeur who picked her up, drove one of those fancy cars like in the movies. Jack thought about Emily's expensive ballet clothes, now that he recalled them properly, and the chauffeur's pristine uniform. But what stuck with him most was the loneliness in her eyes, the way she'd clutched that stuffed rabbit like a lifeline. "Having money doesn't always mean having everything, Sam," Jack said carefully. "She seemed lonely." Sam nodded thoughtfully, understanding in his eyes that sometimes made Jack's heart ache. His son had grown up too fast after Sarah died. Like how Tommy Richards has all the newest video games but nobody to play them with. Something like that. Jack reached over to ruffle Sam's hair. "Now eat up. We've got that carburetor to rebuild in the garage." They spent the morning working side by side in Jack's home garage, a space that had become both workshop and sanctuary. Sam handed tools to his father with practiced ease, asking questions about engine parts and occasionally sharing stories from school. The simple rhythm of their work made Jack almost forget about the previous night's strange encounter. Until the doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock. Sam wiped his greasy hands on a rag. "I'll get it." "Hold up," Jack called, following his son. Years of raising a boy alone had taught him caution about unexpected visitors. Through the front window, they could see a tall man in an expensive suit standing on their worn welcome mat. He held a leather briefcase and wore an expression of polite patience that seemed at odds with their humble neighborhood. Jack opened the door, very aware of his oil-stained work clothes. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Jack Harmon?" The man's voice was crisp and professional. "I represent the Wexler family. Mrs. Margaret Wexler sends her regards and this invitation." He produced an envelope from his briefcase with the careful precision of someone handling something precious. The envelope was thick, cream-colored paper that probably cost more than Jack's weekly grocery bill. A gold wax seal bore an intricate W crest, and his name was written in elegant calligraphy. "Mrs. Wexler would very much appreciate your presence at the estate tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, the man continued. "The matter concerns Miss Emily and last night's incident." Jack accepted the envelope, feeling the weight of the expensive paper. "I'm not sure I understand. All details are included in the invitation." The man interrupted smoothly. "A car will be sent for you, unless you prefer to drive yourself. The address is listed." He gave a small bow. "Good day, Mr. Harmon." They watched as the man walked to a waiting town car, similar to the one from last night, and disappeared down their quiet street. Sam crowded closer, eyes wide. "Dad, what's going on?" Jack turned the envelope over in his hands, studying the seal. The paper alone spoke of wealth he could hardly imagine. "I'm not entirely sure, Bud." "Who's Margaret Wexler?" Sam asked, voicing the question that echoed in Jack's own mind. Jack stared at the envelope, a mix of confusion and wariness settling in his stomach. The events of the past 24 hours felt increasingly surreal. From finding a lost child in the rain to receiving what looked like a royal summons. What exactly had he stepped into? The envelope sat heavy in his hands, its gold crest catching the afternoon light streaming through their front window. Jack's old pickup truck rumbled along Hillcrest Road, each turn taking him deeper into the wealthy side of town he rarely visited. The modest homes he was used to gave way to sprawling estates, hidden behind tall hedges and elaborate gates. His worn flannel shirt and best pair of jeans, though freshly pressed, felt increasingly out of place. The GPS chimed, announcing his arrival. Jack slowed to a stop in front of massive wrought iron gates adorned with an intricate W that matched the seal from yesterday's invitation. A security guard emerged from a small gatehouse, checked Jack's name against a list, and waved him through with unexpected warmth. The driveway wound through perfectly manicured gardens where fountains sparkled in the afternoon sun. Cherry trees lined the path, their pink blossoms drifting like snow in the gentle breeze. Jack's truck looked almost comically out of place among such refined beauty. The mansion itself took his breath away. 3 stories of pale stone rose before him, with tall windows and graceful columns that reminded him of buildings he'd seen in old movies. Several luxury cars were parked in the circular drive, their polished surfaces gleaming. Jack pulled his truck to a stop, feeling like a dandelion in a bed of roses. Before he could even reach for his door handle, it flew open. "Jack, you came!" Emily burst out of the mansion's grand entrance, her face lit up with pure joy. She wore a pale blue dress that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage, but her smile was what caught his attention, genuine and brilliant, nothing like the tear-stained face he'd first met in the rain. She grabbed his hand with surprising strength for such a small person, practically bouncing with excitement. "Come on, grandmother's waiting to meet you." Jack let himself be led up marble steps and through massive wooden doors carved with intricate patterns. The entrance hall stunned him into silence. A crystal chandelier hung from a ceiling 2 stories high, while a sweeping staircase curved up both sides of the room. His work boots echoed on the marble floor. "This way." Emily tugged him toward double doors on the right. "Grandmother always has tea in the drawing room at this time." The drawing room matched the grandeur of the entrance hall, but somehow felt warmer. Thick carpets in deep burgundy covered the floor, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace despite the mild spring day, and comfortable-looking leather chairs were arranged around it. In one of these chairs sat an elderly woman who could only be Margaret Wexler. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she wore a tailored navy suit that spoke of quiet wealth. Despite her obvious age, she sat straight-backed and alert, watching them enter with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Grandmother," Emily bounced over to her. "This is Jack, the man who saved me. He should see our block." Margaret Wexler's stern expression softened slightly as she looked at her granddaughter. "Perhaps introductions first, dear one?" Her voice was rich and cultured, but held genuine warmth when addressing Emily. She turned to Jack, studying him with those penetrating eyes. "Mr. Harmon, thank you for coming. Please, sit." She gestured to the chair opposite her. Jack sank into the leather chair, trying not to feel overwhelmed by his surroundings. "Ma'am, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not sure why I'm here." "You're here because you showed kindness to my granddaughter when she needed it," Margaret said simply. "And because Emily hasn't stopped talking about you since that night." Emily, who had perched on the arm of her grandmother's chair, beamed at this. "Jack should know about our buildings, grandmother. Can I show him the map?" Margaret's lips curved in a small smile. "If you wish, dear." Emily jumped up and rushed to the far wall, where Jack noticed a large framed map of the downtown area. She waved him over eagerly. As Jack approached, he realized it wasn't just any map. It was a detailed layout of the city's historic district, with certain buildings marked with small gold pins. Emily pointed to them excitedly. "See? This one's the old theater, and this is the bookstore with the cat in the window, and here's the ice cream shop." Her finger traced from pin to pin. "They're all ours. Well, grandmother says they belong to the family trust, but that means they're ours, right?" Jack looked closer at the map, realization dawning. The pins marked nearly every significant building in the downtown area, the entire historic block he'd driven past countless times, admiring the preserved architecture and thriving small businesses. "The Wexler family has been part of this town for 4 generations," Margaret explained from her chair. We believe in preserving its character while ensuring it remains vital and alive." Emily nodded seriously. "Grandmother says we're not just owners, we're care-keepers." She stumbled slightly over the word, making it sound even more important. "That means we have to take care of everything and everyone." She looked up at Jack with complete trust. "Like you took care of me." Jack felt something catch in his throat at her words. He looked at the map again, at all those golden pins marking places he knew, places where people worked and lived and built their dreams, places that, apparently, this family quietly maintained and protected. Emily tugged at his sleeve, drawing his attention to another pin. "And this one's my favorite. It's the diner where you bought me hot chocolate." She smiled up at him as if sharing a wonderful secret. "Did you know we owned it? Jerry's been running it forever, Grandmother says. She says good people deserve to keep doing what they love." Margaret gestured to a delicate teacup on the small table beside Jack's chair. "Please help yourself. It's Earl Grey. I find it quite soothing during difficult conversations." Jack carefully lifted the fragile china, feeling like his rough mechanic's hands might shatter it. "Thank you, ma'am." "Now then." Margaret settled back in her chair, her own teacup balanced perfectly in her hands. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Harmon. Emily says you have a son?" "Yes, ma'am. Sam. He's 11. Jack's face softened at the mention of his boy. "He's a good kid. Smart, too. Already knows more about cars than most adults who come into my shop." Emily perked up from where she'd settled on a cushioned window seat. "You fix cars? That's so cool. Can you fix anything?" Jack chuckled. "Well, I try. Been running Harmon's Auto Repair for about 15 years now. It's not much, but it's honest work." "And your wife?" Margaret asked gently, noting how Jack's expression changed. He stared into his teacup for a moment. "Sarah. She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." The words still caught in his throat, but they didn't strangle him like they used to. "She was a kindergarten teacher. The kids loved her." Margaret's face softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm truly sorry for your loss. I know something of raising a child alone. My Herbert passed when Vanessa was just 12. At the mention of Vanessa, Emily's bright mood dimmed slightly. She hugged her knees to her chest, looking out the window at the gardens. Margaret set her teacup down with a quiet clink. "Which brings me to why I asked you here today, Mr. Harmon." She straightened in her chair, her bearing becoming more businesslike. "My daughter Vanessa, Emily's mother, is frequently occupied with business matters. She travels extensively, managing various aspects of our family's investments." Jack noticed how carefully she chose her words, and how Emily seemed to shrink further into herself. "The incident the other night," Margaret continued, "was not the first time Emily has been left waiting due to miscommunication with her caretakers. We've gone through several nannies this year alone." Her voice carried a note of controlled frustration. "What Emily needs is consistency. Someone reliable, trustworthy, and kind." She fixed Jack with those sharp eyes again. "Someone like you, Mr. Harmon." Jack blinked, caught off guard. "Ma'am? I'd like to offer you a position as Emily's driver in personal security." Margaret's tone was matter-of-fact. "You would ensure she gets to and from school safely, accompany her to her various activities, and generally keep watch over her well-being. The salary would be quite generous. Enough to help with your son's future college expenses, I should think." Jack's mind reeled at the suggestion. He thought of his struggling shop, the mounting bills, the college fund for Sam that held far too little. But something else nagged at him. "What about my garage?" he asked. "I can't just abandon my customers." Margaret nodded approvingly, as if his concern confirmed something for her. "You wouldn't have to. We can arrange the schedule around your shop hours. Perhaps hire additional help there? The salary would more than cover it." From her window seat, Emily watched him with barely contained hope, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her dress. I don't know what to say," Jack admitted. "It's a generous offer, but—" He thought of Sam, how this could change things for them both. No more choosing between new school clothes and car repairs. No more lying awake at night wondering how he'd manage next month's mortgage. But it wasn't just about the money. He looked at Emily, saw the loneliness in her eyes that matched what he sometimes saw in Sam's. Two kids who'd lost something precious, one to death, one to absence. "This is quite a lot to process," Margaret said kindly. "Why don't you take tonight to think it over? Discuss it with your son. We can talk details tomorrow if you're interested." Emily jumped up from her seat. "Please say yes, Jack." She rushed over and threw her arms around him in an impulsive hug. "Please?" she whispered. Jack patted her back awkwardly, overwhelmed by the trust this small person placed in him. "I'll think about it really carefully," he promised. "That's the best I can do right now." Margaret rose gracefully from her chair. "That's all we ask." She pressed a business card into his hand. "Call me tomorrow with your decision, whatever it may be." As Jack walked back to his truck, Emily's whispered, "Please say yes," echoed in his mind, along with the memory of that rainy night when she'd wished he was her daddy. Behind him, the grand house loomed like a question mark against the afternoon sky, while ahead, his old pickup waited like a familiar friend. He had a lot to think about tonight. Steam rose from 2 plates of spaghetti as Jack set them on the small kitchen table. Sam was already seated, fork in hand, his homework pushed to the side. "So what did the fancy letter people want?" Sam asked, twirling pasta onto his fork. "Was it about that girl from the bus stop?" Jack settled into his chair, the old wood creaking beneath him. "Yeah, it was. Her name's Emily. She lives with her grandmother in this huge mansion on the hill. You know, the one past Cedar Street?" Sam's eyes widened. "The one that looks like a castle? No way." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, until Jack gave him a gentle reminder tap. "Sorry, but what did they want?" Jack took a deep breath, pushing his meatballs around the plate. "Well, they offered me a job. Emily's grandmother wants me to be her driver and sort of look after her while she's out and about." "Like a bodyguard?" Sam's face lit up. "That's awesome, Dad. Would you get to wear a suit and everything?" Jack couldn't help but smile at his son's enthusiasm. "I suppose I would. But it's a big change, buddy. I'd have to cut back hours at the garage, maybe hire someone to help out there." "But you're always saying we need more help at the garage anyway," Sam pointed out, reaching for his glass of milk. "And Emily seemed nice when you told me about her this morning. How old is she?" 8. Jack watched his son's face carefully. "About 3 years younger than you. She's lonely, I think. Her mom travels a lot for business." Sam's expression grew thoughtful, and Jack saw a flash of understanding cross his young face. They both knew something about loneliness. "You should do it, Dad," Sam said firmly. "We could help her, right? Like how Mrs. Peterson next door helped us after Mom." He trailed off, but Jack understood. The mention of their elderly neighbor who'd brought them casseroles and offered to watch Sam in those first awful months after Sarah's death touched something deep in Jack's heart. He reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. "You're right, buddy. Mrs. Peterson was there when we needed someone. Maybe this is our chance to do that for someone else." Jack paused, then added, "But it would mean some changes for us too. I might not be at the garage as much, though I'd make sure to be home for dinner." "That's okay," Sam said, brightening. "Maybe I could meet Emily sometime? I could show her my comic books, if she likes those kinds of things." Jack felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. He'd been worried about how Sam would take the news, whether he'd feel threatened by the idea of his dad spending time with another child. But here was his boy, already thinking about sharing his treasures. After dinner, they did the dishes together. Sam washing while Jack dried, their usual routine. The familiar rhythm gave Jack time to think, to turn over the day's events in his mind. The money would help with the garage, he said aloud, more to himself than to Sam. Maybe finally fix that lift in Bay 3, get some new diagnostic equipment. "And my college fund?" Sam asked hopefully, hands deep in soapy water. Jack ruffled his son's hair with his free hand. "Yeah, buddy, that too." The thought of securing Sam's future made the decision feel more right with each passing moment. Later that night, after Sam had gone to bed, Jack sat in his favorite armchair, the one Sarah had reupholstered herself years ago. The house was quiet, except for the gentle ticking of the clock on the mantel and the distant hum of traffic. He closed his eyes, hands clasped together, and did what he always did when facing a big decision. He prayed. "Lord," he whispered, "you know I'm not sure about this. It's a different world up there on that hill, way different from fixing engines and living paycheck to paycheck. But that little girl, she needs someone. And maybe we need this too. Just give me a sign if this is the right path." As if in answer, a car passed by outside, its headlights sweeping across the living room wall. They illuminated Sarah's favorite photo, the three of them at the beach, Sam building a sandcastle, while Jack and Sarah smiled at the camera. He remembered how Sarah had always said that love was about more than blood relations, that family could be found in unexpected places. Jack stood up, his decision made. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, after getting Sam off to school, Jack dialed the number Margaret had given him. It rang twice before her crisp voice answered. "Mrs. Wexler? It's Jack Harmon." He took a deep breath. "About that job offer, I'd like to accept." Jack tugged at his collar as he walked up the sweeping driveway of the Wexler estate. His newly pressed white shirt felt stiff and foreign compared to his usual work clothes. He'd woken up extra early to iron it perfectly, wanting to make a good first impression on his official start day. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, and dew still sparkled on the hedges. Jack checked his watch. 7:15 a.m., exactly on time. He'd barely reached the front steps when the massive oak door flew open. "Jack!" Emily burst out, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Her school uniform was pristine, navy blazer, pleated skirt, and polished shoes, but her excitement made her look like any other 8-year-old ready for an adventure. "You came!" "Of course I did." Jack smiled, relaxing a little at her enthusiasm. "Ready for school?" Before Emily could answer, a stern-faced woman in her 50s appeared in the doorway. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she wore a pressed black dress with a white apron. "Mr. Harmon," she said formally. "I'm Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper. Please come in. We need to go over Miss Emily's schedule before you leave." Inside, the foyer gleamed with polished marble. Jack followed Mrs. Chen to a small office off the main hall, while Emily trailed behind them, clutching her rabbit. "Miss Emily's school begins at 8:15 sharp," Mrs. Chen explained, handing Jack a leather-bound planner. "She attends St. Catherine's Academy. On Mondays and Wednesdays, she has ballet at 3:30. Tuesdays are piano lessons at 4:00. Thursdays, she sees her tutor until 5:00. Jack's head spun slightly as he noted each activity. It was more structured than anything Sam had ever done. "What about Fridays?" he asked, noticing the empty slot. "Those are usually free," Mrs. Chen replied, "unless Mrs. Wexler has special events planned." She paused, lowering her voice. "Miss Emily's mother is currently traveling in Europe. She calls on Sundays at 7 p.m. Emily's face fell slightly at the mention of her mother, and she hugged her stuffed rabbit tighter. Jack felt a familiar ache in his chest, the same one he got when Sam tried to hide his sadness about his own mom. "Well then," Jack said brightly, turning to Emily, "shall we get this show on the road?" Emily's smile returned. "Can we take the blue car? The silver one's boring." Mrs. Chen handed Jack a ring of keys. "The vehicles are in the garage. The blue Audi is Miss Emily's favorite, though her grandmother prefers the Mercedes for formal occasions." Jack led Emily to the 3-car garage, where gleaming vehicles sat in perfect alignment. He opened the door of the blue Audi, still amazed that he'd be driving such an expensive car. "Your chariot awaits, my lady," he said with an exaggerated bow, making Emily giggle. During the drive to school, Jack noticed Emily watching him in the rearview mirror. She seemed to be studying him, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "What's Sam like?" she asked suddenly. Jack smiled, remembering his son's enthusiasm about meeting her. "He's 11, loves comic books and helping me fix cars. He's pretty good at math, too, though don't tell him I bragged about that." "Does he like rabbits?" I have 14 stuffed ones. Emily held up her well-loved bunny. This is Mr. Whiskers. He's my favorite. I'm sure Sam would love to meet Mr. Whiskers, Jack assured her. Maybe sometime you could come over and show him your whole rabbit family. Emily's face lit up at the suggestion, but then clouded slightly. If grandmother says it's okay, she added quietly. The rest of the day passed in a blur of new routines and responsibilities. Jack familiarized himself with the best routes between Emily's various activities, learned which parking spots to avoid at the school, and discovered Emily's favorite radio stations. The ride home was quieter. Emily sat in the back seat, staring out the window as houses and shops rolled by. Jack could see the exhaustion in her small face. It was a long day for an 8-year-old. You know what this car reminds me of? Jack said, breaking the silence. Emily perked up slightly. What? A blueberry. A very fancy, very shiny blueberry. A smile tugged at Emily's lips. That's silly. Cars can't be blueberries. Oh no? Then how come I feel like making jam every time I look at it? Emily's giggle filled the car. You're funny, Jack. Not like the other drivers. They never talk to me at all. Well, that's their loss, Jack said. They missed out on some quality conversation with you and Mr. Whiskers. When they arrived back at the estate, Emily didn't immediately hop out of the car like she had at school. Instead, she pulled something from her backpack. I made this during art class, she said shyly, handing Jack a piece of paper. It was a crayon drawing of 3 figures holding hands. The tallest wore what looked like a white shirt and had brown hair. Clearly Jack. Next to him was a boy in a red t-shirt, labeled Sam in careful printing. On the other side was a small girl in a blue dress holding a brown rabbit. Jack felt his throat tighten as he looked at the simple drawing. Above the figures, Emily had written in large letters, "My new friends." Do you think Sam will like it? Emily asked anxiously. We could hang it up somewhere. Maybe in the garage where you work? He'll love it, Jack assured her, carefully folding the drawing and tucking it into his shirt pocket. And I know exactly where to put it, right next to my toolbox where I can see it every day. Emily beamed, then gave him a quick hug before darting out of the car and up the steps where Mrs. Chen waited. Jack watched her go, the drawing a warm weight against his heart, knowing that, somehow, this job was going to be about much more than just driving a car. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of the Riverside Dance Academy. Jack sat in the blue Audi, reading a dog-eared paperback while waiting for Emily's ballet class to finish. The past week had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Morning drop-offs filled with silly jokes, afternoon pickups with stories about their days, and quiet drives where Emily would sometimes nap, tired from her busy schedule. A sharp tap on his window startled Jack from his reading. He looked up to see a striking woman in her mid-30s, dressed in an expensive black suit that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, highlighting sharp cheekbones and cold eyes that studied him with barely concealed disdain. Jack rolled down the window, already knowing who she must be. Mrs. Wexler? Miss? She corrected icily. Vanessa Wexler. You must be the new driver my mother hired. Jack Harmon, he offered with a polite smile, though she hadn't asked. It's nice to meet you. Emily's told me a lot about... Yes, I'm sure she has. Vanessa cut him off, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the car door. Mother informed me about your heroic rescue the other week. Very touching. Her tone suggested it was anything but. Jack kept his expression neutral, remembering Margaret's warnings about Vanessa's protective nature. Just trying to help, he said simply. Vanessa's eyes swept over him, taking in his plain button-down shirt and worn shoes. Well, I appreciate you playing chauffeur for my daughter, Mr. Harmon. But let's be clear about something. Emily has a tendency to become overly attached to staff members. It's best not to encourage it. Jack felt his jaw tighten, but maintained his calm demeanor. I'm just doing my job, Miss Wexler, making sure Emily gets where she needs to be, safely and on time. Of course. Vanessa smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Just don't get too comfortable. Family affairs can be complicated. I wouldn't want you to overstep any boundaries." Before Jack could respond, the studio doors opened and students began streaming out in their leotards and dance shoes. Emily appeared, her face lighting up when she spotted the car, until she saw who was standing beside it. Her steps faltered, and she clutched her dance bag closer. "Mom?" Emily's voice was small, uncertain. "You're back?" "Hello, darling." Vanessa's tone warmed slightly but remained formal. "I thought I'd surprise you." The Milan meetings wrapped up early. Emily shifted from foot to foot, looking between her mother and Jack. Are you taking me home?" No, I have a dinner meeting downtown. I just wanted to check in." Vanessa straightened Emily's ballet bun with quick, efficient movements. "Make sure you're practicing your piano pieces. Your instructor said you've been distracted lately." "I practiced yesterday," Emily mumbled, looking at her feet. "Well, practice more. The winter recital isn't far off." Vanessa checked her watch. "I have to run. We'll talk properly on Sunday during our call." With a sharp nod to Jack and a pat on Emily's shoulder, Vanessa clicked away on her heels toward a waiting town car. Emily watched her go, shoulders slumped, before climbing into the back seat of the Audi. Jack waited until they were on the road before glancing in the rearview mirror. Emily sat quietly, picking at a loose thread on her dance bag. "You okay back there, kiddo?" Emily nodded, then shook her head, then shrugged, a full range of uncertainty in 3 quick movements. "I didn't know Mom was coming back." "Surprises can be tough sometimes," Jack said gently. "She didn't even ask about my new ballet routine," Emily said, her voice wobbling slightly. "Or about school or anything." Jack's heart ached at the hurt in her voice. He thought about Sam, how even on his busiest days, they always found time to talk about what mattered: homework struggles, friend drama, the latest superhero movie. "Mom never talks to me like you do," Emily muttered so quietly Jack almost missed it. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, choosing his next words carefully. The last thing he wanted was to make things harder between Emily and her mother, despite what he thought about Vanessa's parenting style. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "grown-ups get so busy with their own stuff, they forget how to slow down and really listen. It doesn't mean they don't care." Emily considered this, hugging her dance bag like it was one of her stuffed rabbits. "Do you get busy like that?" "Sure do. But you know what helps? Sam reminds me when I'm going too fast. He'll say, 'Dad, you're doing that zombie thing again.' That's what we call it when I'm not paying attention properly." This drew a small giggle from Emily. "Like a brain-eating zombie?" "Exactly. Though in my case, it's more like a coffee-drinking, schedule-checking zombie." Jack made an exaggerated zombie face in the mirror, earning another laugh. "Can I tell you when you're being a zombie?" Emily asked, perking up slightly. "Absolutely. Though I promise to try my best not to turn into one in the first place." The tension in the car eased as they continued their drive, Emily gradually returning to her usual chatty self as she described her ballet routine. But Jack couldn't shake the chill from his encounter with Vanessa. Her warning had been clear. He was just the help, and she was watching. As they pulled up to the Wexler estate, Emily gathered her things but paused before getting out. "Jack?" "Yeah?" "Thanks for listening, even when you're not a zombie." Jack smiled, though his heart felt heavy. "Anytime, kiddo. That's what friends are for." He watched her skip up the steps, greeted by Mrs. Chen's familiar efficiency. The drawing Emily had given him last week was still in his garage at home, carefully tacked above his workbench. Looking at it now, he wondered if Vanessa's warning would mean the end of these easy conversations, these small moments of connection that seemed to mean so much to Emily. But as he put the car in drive, Jack made a quiet decision. He would keep doing his job, not just the driving part, but the listening part too. Because sometimes, he knew, that's what kids needed most. Someone who would simply hear them, zombie-free. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass walls of Margaret Wexler's private sunroom, casting warm patterns across the white wicker furniture and potted orchids. Jack stood awkwardly in the doorway, still not quite used to the grandeur of the estate, even after several weeks on the job. "Come in, Jack," Margaret called, gesturing to the chair across from her. "And please relax. This isn't a formal meeting." Jack settled into the cushioned seat, taking in the peaceful space. Unlike the mansion's other rooms with their heavy antiques and oil paintings, the sunroom felt alive and welcoming. Climbing vines framed the windows, and a collection of well-loved gardening tools sat in a corner. "Tea?" Margaret asked, already reaching for the silver pot. "It's Earl Grey, my afternoon weakness." "Thank you, ma'am." Jack accepted the delicate cup, careful not to grip it too tightly. "Margaret, please." She smiled, the stern lines of her face softening. "I think we're past formalities, don't you?" Jack nodded, sipping the tea. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to birds chirping in the garden outside. Margaret seemed lost in thought, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I saw Vanessa yesterday," she finally said. "She mentioned meeting you at the ballet studio." Jack set his cup down carefully. "Yes, ma'am. Margaret. She seemed concerned about my role here." Margaret sighed, her shoulders dropping slightly. "My daughter has always been protective of what she considers hers. Though sometimes I wonder if she knows what truly matters." She stood, walking to a small side table where family photos sat in silver frames. "This was Vanessa at Emily's age," she said, picking up a photo of a little girl in riding clothes, her smile stiff and formal. "Already so proper, so concerned with appearances. I thought I was doing right by her, the best schools, the finest clothes, every advantage money could buy." She returned to her seat, the photo still in her hands. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot to teach her about the things money can't buy: kindness, empathy, the joy of helping others simply because it's right." Jack thought about his own son, how they sometimes struggled to make ends meet, but always found spare change for the donation jar at the grocery store. How Sam insisted on shoveling their elderly neighbor's walkway every winter, refusing payment with a proud grin. "It's not too late," Jack offered gently. "People can change." Margaret's laugh held no humor. "Perhaps. But I see Emily now, so much like Vanessa was, yet desperate for something different. When she talks about you and Sam, her whole face lights up. Do you know what she told me yesterday?" Jack shook his head. "She said you taught her how to check the air in her bicycle tires. Such a simple thing. But she was so proud. 'Now I can help other kids with their bikes too,' she said." Margaret's eyes grew misty. "That's what I should have taught Vanessa, the satisfaction of being useful, of helping others." She set the photo aside and leaned forward, her gaze intense. "I see in you, Jack, the steadiness that Emily needs. The grounding influence I failed to provide for her mother. You treat her like a person, not a porcelain doll or a future heiress." "She's just a kid who needs someone to listen," Jack said simply. "Same as any other." "Exactly." Margaret nodded approvingly. "That's precisely why I wanted you here. Not just as a driver, but as a stabilizing presence. Someone who sees her for who she is, not what she represents." Jack thought about Vanessa's warning about getting too comfortable. Her mother might not agree. "Let me handle Vanessa," Margaret said firmly. "What I need to know is, can I count on you to help protect Emily's happiness, to show her there's more to life than bank accounts and social standings?" Jack didn't hesitate. "I promise. For as long as I'm here, I'll do my best to help Emily grow into the person she wants to be, not just who others expect her to be." Margaret's shoulders relaxed, as if a weight had been lifted. "Thank you, Jack. That's exactly what I needed to hear." Before either could say more, rapid footsteps echoed down the hallway. Emily burst into the sunroom, her school uniform slightly rumpled, and her eyes bright with excitement. "Jack, grandmother, did you hear about the street fair?" She bounced on her toes, barely containing her enthusiasm. "Mrs. Chen said they're having one downtown next weekend, right on our block." Margaret smiled indulgently. "Yes, dear. The Business Association organizes it every year. There's going to be games and food trucks and music." Emily turned to Jack, her eyes pleading. "You'll come, won't you? Please?" Sam can come too. We can all go together." Jack glanced at Margaret, who gave him a subtle nod. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, kiddo." Emily's smile could have lit up the whole sunroom. "Really? Promise?" "Promise." Jack held out his pinky finger, and Emily wrapped hers around it solemnly. "Grandmother, can I show Jack the poster they gave us at school? It has pictures of all the booths." "Of course, dear. I believe Mrs. Chen put it on your desk." Emily grabbed Jack's hand, tugging him up. "Come on, you have to see it. They're even having a charity booth where kids can sell their old toys." As Emily pulled him toward the door, Jack caught Margaret's eye. She raised her teacup in a small salute, her expression warm with approval. In that moment, Jack understood that this wasn't just about driving Emily to her activities or keeping her safe. It was about helping a little girl find her way to becoming someone different than what her circumstances might have created. Someone kind, someone genuine, someone who understood the true value of things that couldn't be bought. And that, he realized, was a responsibility worth all the warnings in the world. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Jack walked from shop to shop, clipboard in hand. The street fair was just a week away, and as the newest member of the business community, even if only by association with the Wexlers, he'd volunteered to help coordinate the layout. Mrs. Chen waved him into her flower shop, the bell above the door chiming softly. "Jack, come in, come in! I have the measurements for our booth space right here." The small shop smelled of roses and fresh soil. Mrs. Chen pulled a carefully drawn diagram from behind the counter. "We'll need extra room for the flower crown making station. The children love it every year." Jack noted it down, smiling. "Emily mentioned that. She said your booth was her favorite last year." "Such a sweet girl," Mrs. Chen said, arranging a bouquet as they talked. "Different now, you know. More. Sparkly in the eyes since you came along." Before Jack could respond, the bell chimed again. "Mr. Rodriguez from the bakery poked his head in, clutching papers. "Jack, good, you're here. About my booth location. I need to be away from direct sunlight. The pastries, you understand?" One by one, other shop owners drifted in, until Mrs. Chen's tiny store was packed with people waving papers and chattering about booth placements. Jack worked through their requests methodically, drawing and redrawing the layout until everyone was satisfied. "What about the charity section?" Mr. Rodriguez asked, brushing flour from his apron. "Same spot as last year?" "Actually," Jack said, "Emily Wexler wants to run a booth there. She's planning to sell her old toys for the children's hospital." The shop owners exchanged pleased looks. They were used to the Wexlers being distant landlords, not active participants in community events. "Well, well," Mrs. Chen said, beaming. "Times really are changing around here." Later that afternoon, Jack pulled up to the mansion in his pickup truck. Emily was already waiting on the front steps, practically vibrating with excitement. "Can we go sort the toys now?" she asked, bouncing into the passenger seat. "I made a whole list of which ones to sell." "First stop is the garage to pick up Sam," Jack said, adjusting her seatbelt. "He's excited to help, too." They found Sam sweeping the garage floor, his homework finished and spread across Jack's old desk. "Finally," he called out. "I've been waiting forever." The drive to the mansion was filled with Emily and Sam's chatter about the fair. When they reached Emily's playroom, both kids stopped short. Jack had to admit, the sight was impressive. Shelves upon shelves of toys, many still in their original packaging. "Where do we start?" Sam asked, eyes wide. Emily pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. "I made categories: keep, sell, and fix." She pointed to different areas of the room. "The ones I never really played with can definitely go to the hospital." They worked through the afternoon, creating piles that grew steadily larger. Emily surprised Jack with her generosity, readily parting with expensive toys that had barely been touched. She lingered only over items that held real memories. A teddy bear from her grandmother, a toy car she and Sam had played with during his first visit. "Hey, this just needs new batteries," Sam said, examining a robot dog. "Dad can fix it, right?" Jack took the toy, turning it over in his hands. Sure can. We can set up a repair station in the garage for anything that needs a little love. Emily clapped her hands. Like a toy hospital before they go to the real hospital. Can we make it pretty too, with signs and decorations? I've got some paint in the garage, Jack said. We could make it a whole project. They loaded the fix pile into Jack's truck and headed back to the garage. Sam cleared a workbench while Emily carefully arranged the toys that needed repair. Jack showed them how to test batteries, tighten loose parts, and clean scuffed surfaces. Now for the fun part, Jack announced, pulling out several cans of paint and some large pieces of cardboard. Every good booth needs signs. Emily's face lit up. Can we make them really colorful? With glitter, maybe? I think we can manage that, Jack laughed, spreading newspapers across the floor. They worked together, Sam sketching out letters while Emily added flourishes and stars. Jack helped them write Toys for Tots and all proceeds to Children's Hospital in bright, cheerful colors. Dad, you've got paint on your nose, Sam snickered, pointing with a dripping brush. Oh yeah? Jack swiped his finger through some blue paint and dotted Sam's cheek. Now you do too. Emily giggled, then squealed as Sam playfully flicked paint in her direction. No fair, I wasn't ready. Soon they were all laughing, their clothes spotted with rainbow dots of paint. The signs lay drying on the workbench, cheerful and slightly messy, perfect for a children's charity booth. I think this calls for a celebration, Jack announced, checking his watch. Ice cream at Ruby's? Yes, both kids shouted, scrambling to their feet. They didn't bother changing, proudly wearing their paint-spotted clothes to the ice cream parlor. Ruby raised an eyebrow at their appearance, but smiled as she scooped their orders. Chocolate for Sam, strawberry for Emily, and vanilla for Jack. Looking festive today, she commented, adding extra sprinkles to both kids' cones. They settled into a booth, Emily and Sam on one side, Jack on the other. Emily had ice cream on her chin, a spot of blue paint in her hair, and the biggest smile Jack had seen yet. This was the best day, she declared, licking strawberry ice cream from her fingers. Can we do more tomorrow? Sure thing, kiddo, Jack said, watching as Sam helped her wipe ice cream from her face, the two of them giggling like siblings. We've still got plenty of toys to fix up. And more signs to make, Sam added, showing off his paint-stained hands. Emily nodded enthusiastically, managing to get more ice cream on her nose. We're going to have the best booth at the whole fair. Jack looked at them both, his son and this little girl, who'd somehow worked her way into their hearts, covered in paint and ice cream and pure joy. Sometimes the best moments in life, he thought, were also the messiest. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Willow Creek's main street as Jack pulled his truck up to the curb. The usually quiet block had transformed overnight into a festival of colors and sounds. Striped tents dotted the sidewalks, and the smell of fresh popcorn and cotton candy already filled the air. Emily practically bounced in her seat, her face pressed against the window. Look at all the people already here! She pointed excitedly at the growing crowd. And the balloons! And, oh, Mrs. Chen's flower crown station is right next to our spot. Sam helped unload the boxes of carefully repaired toys from the truck bed while Jack and Emily set up their folding table. They hung their hand-painted signs, now dry and sparkly, from the tent poles. Perfect height, Jack said, stepping back to admire their work. The morning light caught the glitter they'd added, making the words, Toys for Tots, shimmer invitingly. Emily arranged the toys with careful precision, making sure each stuffed animal sat just right. She'd insisted on giving them all fresh ribbons around their necks, and the effect was charming. The mechanical toys that Jack had fixed were lined up on one side, ready for demonstration. Would you like to test the robot dog? Emily asked a little boy who'd wandered over with his mother. She pressed the button, and the toy yipped and did a small flip, making the child laugh in delight. How much? The mother asked, reaching for her purse. $10, Emily said proudly. And all the money goes to help sick kids at the hospital. The mother smiled, handing over the money. What a wonderful cause. Word spread quickly about the little girl with the big heart running the charity booth. People stopped by not just to buy toys, but to chat with Emily, who greeted everyone with genuine warmth. "My grandmother says these toys need new homes," she explained to an elderly couple examining a pristine dollhouse. "And other children need them more than I do." Mrs. Chen came over during a quiet moment, placing a delicate flower crown on Emily's head. "For our newest shopkeeper," she said with a wink. "You're doing a wonderful job, dear." Around noon, a woman in a crisp blazer approached their booth, notebook in hand. "Hi there. I'm Sarah Mitchell from the Willow Creek Gazette. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about your charity drive?" Emily looked at Jack questioningly. He nodded encouragingly. "Of course." Emily straightened up, adjusting her flower crown. "Would you like to see how the robot dog works?" Sarah laughed, pulling out her phone to record. "I'd love to. Can you tell me what made you want to do this?" "Well," Emily said, demonstrating the toy, "I had lots of toys that were just sitting in my room. And Jack, he's my..." She paused, looking up at him with a smile. "He's my friend. He helped me fix the broken ones in his garage. We thought maybe other kids would love them more than my shelves did." "Jack Harmon, right?" Sarah turned to him. "What inspired you to help with this project?" Jack rubbed the back of his neck, slightly uncomfortable with the attention. "Emily came up with the idea herself. I just helped with the repairs and logistics. She's got a big heart, wanted to make a difference in her own way." "And how has the community responded?" "Just look around." Jack gestured to their nearly empty table. "People here understand the importance of helping others. Emily's enthusiasm is contagious." Sarah snapped a few photos of Emily showing another customer the remaining toys. "It's not often we see the younger generation of the Wexler family so involved in community events," she observed. "Emily's special that way," Jack said simply, watching as the girl carefully wrapped a teddy bear in tissue paper for a customer. "She sees the value in connecting with people." The afternoon flew by in a blur of sales and smiles. By 4 o'clock, their table was almost bare. Emily sat counting the money with Sam, both of them cross-legged under the tent. $2,342, Emily announced triumphantly, carefully placing the cash in a donation envelope. "That's so many toys." "You did good, kiddo," Jack said, ruffling her hair. The flower crown was slightly askew, and her cheeks were flushed with excitement. As they packed up the tent and folded the table, several shop owners stopped by to congratulate Emily. Mr. Rodriguez brought over a box of fresh cookies for our hard-working charity workers, and Mrs. Chen added one last flower to Emily's crown. The sun was setting as they loaded everything back into Jack's truck. Emily climbed into the middle seat between Jack and Sam, still clutching the precious envelope. The gentle motion of the truck and the exhaustion of the exciting day soon had her eyes drooping. "Did we do good, Jack?" she mumbled sleepily, her head gradually tilting until it rested against his arm. "We did great, sweetheart," he answered softly. But Emily was already asleep, the donation envelope held securely in her hands, a peaceful smile on her face. Sam reached over and carefully straightened her flower crown. "She's pretty cool, isn't she, Dad?" Jack glanced down at Emily's sleeping face, then caught his son's eye with a warm smile. "Yeah, she really is." The truck rumbled quietly through the darkening streets, carrying its precious cargo home after a day of making dreams come true, not just for the future recipients of the toys, but for a little girl who'd found her own way to make a difference. The Monday morning after the street fair dawned gray and chilly. Jack pulled up to the Wexler estate at his usual time, 7:30 sharp, watching his breath form little clouds in the crisp autumn air as he walked to the front door. The weekend's warmth and joy still lingered in his mind, the successful fair, Emily's beaming face as she handed over the donation envelope, the proud article in Sunday's paper featuring their charity booth. Before he could ring the doorbell, the heavy oak door swung open. Instead of Emily's cheerful greeting, he found himself face to face with Vanessa Wexler. She wore a tailored black suit that probably cost more than his monthly salary, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. "Mr. Harmon," she said, her voice as cold as the morning air. "Come in. We need to talk." Jack hesitated for a moment before stepping into the foyer. The house felt different this morning, the usual warmth replaced by a sterile silence. No sound of Emily's footsteps rushing down the stairs, no cheerful chatter about the day ahead. "Where's Emily?" he asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Getting ready," Vanessa replied, leading him to the formal sitting room. "Martha will bring her down when we're finished." She gestured to an antique chair, but remained standing herself, moving to the fireplace where the Sunday paper lay open to the article about the street fair. The photo showed Emily and Jack laughing together at their booth, her flower crown slightly askew. "Quite the publicity stunt," Vanessa said, picking up the paper. "Local mechanic helps Wexler heiress connect with community." "Did you pitch this story to the paper yourself?" Jack felt his jaw tighten. "The reporter approached us. Emily was excited to share what she was doing for the children's hospital." "Oh, I'm sure she was." Vanessa's perfectly painted lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've certainly managed to endear yourself to her. And to my mother. And now, apparently, to the entire town." She set her coffee cup down with a sharp click. "Let me be clear, Mr. Harmon. I know men like you, small-town mechanics who suddenly find themselves with access to wealth and influence, who think they can work their way into a family's good graces by playing hero to a lonely little girl. That's not what this is," Jack said firmly, staying seated despite his instinct to stand. "I'm just doing the job I was hired to do." "Are you?" Vanessa arched an eyebrow. "Was organizing charity events part of your driver duties? Or having my daughter spend time in your garage with your son?" "I've seen the way you're positioning yourself, Mr. Harmon. The concerned father figure. The humble local businessman helping the wealthy little girl learn about real life." She made air quotes with her fingers. "It's quite a narrative you're building." "Emily came up with the charity idea herself," Jack defended, keeping his voice level despite the anger building in his chest. "I just helped her make it happen." "Of course you did." Vanessa walked to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens. "And I'm sure you had nothing to do with the reporter mentioning how unusual it is to see the Wexler family involved in community events. A subtle dig at my parenting, perhaps?" "I never said anything about—" "You didn't have to." She turned back to face him. "You've been here, 2 months? And already you're featured in the paper with my daughter, praised by the local shopkeepers, held up as some kind of working-class hero." Her voice took on a sharper edge. "But let me remind you of something, Mr. Harmon. My mother may control the estate now, but I have considerable influence over her decisions. And your time here is limited." Before Jack could respond, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Emily appeared in the doorway, her school backpack clutched tightly to her chest. Her eyes darted between Jack and her mother. "Ready for school?" she asked quietly, addressing neither of them specifically. "Of course, sweetheart." Vanessa's tone transformed instantly into sugary sweetness. "Mr. Harmon was just leaving. Have a good day at school." She bent to kiss Emily's cheek, leaving a perfect red lipstick mark that Emily wiped away when her mother turned back to the window. Jack opened the front door, letting Emily walk ahead of him to the car. As he started the engine, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Emily sat silently in the back seat, staring out the window at her mother's figure still visible through the sitting room glass. The drive was unusually quiet. No chatter about homework or after-school plans. No humming along to the radio. Just the soft sound of tires on pavement and Emily's occasional sighs from the back seat. Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, Vanessa's words echoing in his mind. He wanted to say something to break the tension, to restore the easy warmth they usually shared. But every time he opened his mouth, he remembered Vanessa's accusations about positioning himself in Emily's life. They were halfway to school when Emily finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jack?" "Yeah, kiddo?" "The fair was really good, wasn't it?" He caught her eye in the rearview mirror, seeing the worry there, the need for reassurance. "It was great. You did an amazing thing for those kids at the hospital." She nodded, then went back to staring out the window. The silence felt heavier now, weighted with unspoken questions and fears. Jack drove on, watching the familiar streets pass by. everything looking somehow grayer than it had just yesterday. As they approached the school, Emily clutched her backpack closer. The morning drop-off line moved slowly, giving Jack too much time to think about Vanessa's threats and what they might mean for his future, and more importantly, for Emily's. He pulled up to the curb, but before Emily could open her door, he turned in his seat to face her. "Hey," he said softly, "you okay?" She nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on her shoes. "See you after school?" The question carried more weight than usual, as if she needed confirmation that nothing had changed. "Same time as always," Jack assured her, trying to keep his voice steady and normal. "Maybe we can stop for hot chocolate if it stays this chilly." That earned him a small smile before she slipped out of the car and joined the stream of students heading into the building. Jack watched until she disappeared through the front doors, then pulled away from the curb, his mind still churning with Vanessa's words and the quiet dread they had planted in his heart. The morning drop-offs and afternoon pickups became an exercise in holding his breath. Each time Jack pulled up to the Wexler estate, he half expected to see Vanessa's sleek Mercedes parked in the circular driveway. More often than not lately, she was there. On Monday, she appeared just as Emily was climbing into the car, commenting loudly about how quaint it was that Emily insisted on riding in "this old thing" instead of their luxury vehicles. Jack watched in the rearview mirror as Emily's shoulders hunched forward, her usual morning chatter replaced by silence. Wednesday brought another surprise visit. This time, Vanessa swept into the kitchen just as Jack was helping Emily pack her lunch, something they'd started doing together after Emily mentioned she loved his son Sam's sandwich combinations. "Oh, darling," Vanessa had cooed, plucking the brown paper bag from Emily's hands. "We have staff for this sort of thing. Mr. Harmon surely has more important duties than playing cook." Emily's face had fallen, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I like making lunch with Jack," she'd whispered, but Vanessa had already summoned the housekeeper to take over. By Friday, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jack arrived to find Vanessa inspecting his car with exaggerated concern. "The brake lights seem a bit dim," she announced, though Jack had checked all the vehicle's systems just yesterday. "Perhaps we should have Emily driven in one of our cars instead, for safety reasons, of course." Emily, standing in the doorway with her backpack, looked ready to cry. Jack noticed she'd stopped wearing the friendship bracelet Sam had made her, probably to avoid more of her mother's pointed comments about mixing with the help's children. The only bright spot came during his weekly meeting with Margaret. The elderly woman had noticed the change in atmosphere and called Jack into her study while Emily was at piano practice. "I hope you know," Margaret said, pouring tea with steady hands, "that I see what's happening here." Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mrs. Wexler, Margaret, please." She set down the teapot with a gentle clink. "And let me finish. I see how Vanessa is trying to push you out. I also see how much happier Emily has been since you came into our lives." She leaned forward, her eyes kind but determined. "I want you to know that I trust you, Jack, completely." "Thank you," Jack managed, relief washing over him. "That means a lot." "Emily needs stability," Margaret continued. "She needs someone who sees her for who she is, not what she represents. That's you, Jack. Don't let Vanessa make you doubt that." But doubt had a way of creeping in, especially during the long drives home after dropping Emily off. Jack found himself analyzing every interaction, second-guessing every decision. Should he stop their morning ritual of sharing silly jokes? Should he maintain more professional distance? The changes in Emily were the hardest to bear. The bright, chatty girl who'd bounded into his car each morning now moved like a shadow, speaking only when spoken to. Her drawings, once full of color and life, became muted and sparse. Even Sam noticed the difference when they passed her at the park over the weekend. "Why didn't Emily wave back?" Sam had asked, confused by her hurried retreat to her waiting nanny. Jack hadn't known how to explain that sometimes doing the right thing, being there for someone who needs you, could make things complicated. The following Tuesday, after a particularly tense morning where Vanessa had, coincidentally, scheduled a series of appointments that required her to supervise every moment of Emily's departure, Jack finally headed home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would normally lift his spirits. But today, even the beautiful sunset couldn't shake the heaviness in his chest. He turned onto his street, automatically checking his rearview mirror, a habit born from weeks of watching for Vanessa's car trailing him. The familiar sight of his small garage came into view, but something was wrong. Even in the fading light, he could see dark marks marring the white-painted walls. Jack's heart pounded as he pulled into the driveway. There, sprawled across the garage door in angry red spray paint, were two words that made his blood run cold. "Stay away." The paint was still fresh enough that tiny droplets had run down the door's metal surface like tears of warning. Jack sat in his truck, staring at the vandalism, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. This was more than Vanessa's usual subtle threats. This was a line crossed, a message that couldn't be ignored or explained away. And yet, all Jack could think about was Emily's face that morning, how she'd whispered, "See you tomorrow?" with such uncertainty in her voice. He climbed out of the truck slowly, his work boots crunching on scattered bits of broken glass. Someone had smashed the small window beside the garage door too. The evening air felt thick and heavy, carrying the sharp chemical smell of spray paint. Sam would be home from his friend's house soon. Jack needed to clean this up before then, needed to maintain some semblance of normalcy for his son. But as he stood there, staring at those hateful words, he wondered if anything about this situation could ever be considered normal again. The sound of a car approaching made him tense, but it was just Mrs. Henderson from next door, returning from her evening church group. She slowed as she passed, her eyes widening at the vandalism. Jack managed a weak wave, trying to convey that everything was fine, though they both knew it wasn't. He walked to the small shed behind the garage where he kept his cleaning supplies. The familiar motions of gathering buckets and rags helped steady his hands, gave him something concrete to focus on besides the fear and anger swirling in his gut. The sky continued to darken as Jack worked, scrubbing at the paint that seemed determined to mock him with its stubborn presence. Each stroke of the cleaning brush felt like a battle between what was right and what was easy. It would be easier to walk away, to protect himself and Sam from whatever escalation might come next. But then he thought of Emily's smile when she'd sold her last toy at the charity fair, of her quiet determination to make a difference in her own small way. He thought of Margaret's words about stability and trust. Most of all, he thought about what he'd be teaching Sam if he let intimidation drive him away from helping someone who needed him. The garage door was still stubbornly stained with faint red marks when Jack heard Sam's familiar footsteps coming up the driveway. He turned to face his son, wondering how to explain this latest development in their increasingly complicated lives. The grandfather clock in Margaret's study chimed 3 times as Jack stood before her massive oak desk. He'd received an urgent call during Emily's piano lesson, asking him to come to the estate immediately. The room felt colder than usual, despite the afternoon sun streaming through the tall windows. Margaret sat straight-backed in her leather chair, her face drawn and pale. Papers were spread across her desk, something unusual for a woman known for her precise organization. Her hands trembled slightly as she gestured for Jack to sit down. "I hoped I would never have to have this conversation, Jack," Margaret said, her voice carrying none of its usual warmth. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Jack's stomach tightened. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Wexler? Is Emily okay?" "Emily is fine," Margaret replied, picking up a sheet of paper with careful fingers. "But I'm afraid we have a serious matter to discuss." She slid the paper across the desk. Jack leaned forward to look at it. A bank statement. His eyes widened as he saw his name at the top, along with transaction details he didn't recognize. "These are withdrawals made from the Children's Hospital Charity Fund," Margaret explained, her voice growing harder. "Matched exactly to deposits in your personal account." Jack's heart stopped. "That's impossible," he said, picking up the paper. I would never." "The evidence is quite clear," Margaret cut in. She pulled out another document. "Here are photos of you at the ATM on these exact dates and times." Jack stared at grainy security camera photos. While they showed him at an ATM, He knew he'd never made those transactions. "Mrs. Wexler, these must be doctored. I swear to you, I haven't touched a penny of that money." "I trusted you, Jack." Margaret's voice cracked slightly. "More importantly, Emily trusted you. Do you know what this will do to her?" "Please," Jack said, leaning forward. "This isn't what it looks like. Someone set this up. The dates on these photos, I was picking Emily up from ballet on at least 2 of them. You can check the log books." Margaret's face softened for just a moment before hardening again. "The timing allows for both. You could have stopped at the ATM on the way." "Call the bank," Jack insisted. "Check the security footage. Something's not right here." "I've already spoken with the bank manager," Margaret replied. "The transactions are legitimate from your account." Jack ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "Mrs. Wexler, Margaret, you know me. You know I would never steal from sick children, from Emily's charity project. Please." For a moment, silence filled the room. The grandfather clock ticked loudly, marking each heavy second. "I thought I knew you," Margaret said quietly. "I thought I'd finally found someone who could be trusted with Emily's well-being. Someone who understood what really matters." "You have," Jack said earnestly. "Think about everything we've done together. The fair, the community projects. I've never asked for anything except to help." Margaret stood up slowly, walking to the window. Her reflection showed pain etched across her face. Perhaps that was part of the plan all along. Gain our trust. Become indispensable. "No," Jack said firmly, standing up. "Mrs. Wexler, someone is trying to frame me. Think about who might want me gone. Who might have access to bank records, to security footage?" Margaret turned sharply. "Are you suggesting someone in this family would do such a thing?" Jack chose his next words carefully. "I'm suggesting that someone doesn't want me here. Someone who's made that very clear." "Enough," Margaret said, raising a hand. "I can't listen to accusations without proof. Not when I'm holding evidence in my hands." "Manufactured evidence," Jack insisted. "Please, give me time to prove it." Margaret returned to her desk, sinking into her chair. She suddenly looked every one of her years, the weight of disappointment visible in her shoulders. "I'm sorry, Jack. Until this matter is resolved, I have to ask you not to return to the estate." Jack felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "What about Emily?" "We'll arrange for another driver," Margaret said, not meeting his eyes. "Someone will bring your final paycheck to your home." "This isn't about the money," Jack said, his voice hoarse. "Emily needs consistency. She needs people she can trust." "Yes," Margaret agreed quietly. "She does. That's why you need to leave. Now." Jack stood there for a long moment, his mind spinning. Everything he'd built over these months, the trust, the relationships, the sense of family, was crumbling around him based on lies. "I'll go," he said finally. "But please, before you tell Emily anything, look deeper into those records. Something isn't right, and I think you know it." Margaret didn't respond, just stared down at the papers on her desk. Jack turned and walked to the door, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. As he reached for the handle, Margaret spoke one last time. "I wanted to believe in you, Jack. More than you know." Jack paused, his hand on the doorknob. "I've never given you reason not to, Mrs. Wexler. I hope you'll remember that." He stepped out into the hallway, closing the door quietly behind him. As he walked through the grand house toward the front entrance, he passed the wall where Emily's charity fair photos hung. Her smile beamed out at him, full of trust and joy. Jack's chest ached as he pushed open the heavy front door and stepped out into the afternoon sun. He had no idea how he would tell Sam or how they would manage without this income. But worse than all of that was knowing that somewhere in this massive house, Emily would soon learn that another adult in her life had seemingly betrayed her trust. The windshield wipers squeaked back and forth, clearing away a light drizzle as Jack steered his car down the long driveway of the Wexler estate. His knuckles were white against the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, he could see Emily's small frame shaking with sobs in the back seat. "It's not fair," Emily choked out between tears. "You didn't do anything wrong." Jack's throat felt tight. "Sometimes life isn't fair, sweetheart. But the truth always comes out in the end." Emily's crying grew louder. She clutched her stuffed rabbit, the same one she'd had that rainy night at the bus stop, pressing it against her face to muffle her sobs. Through the mansion's windows, Jack could see Margaret's silhouette watching them leave. Her normally straight posture seemed slightly bent, as if carrying a heavy weight. She raised one hand, then let it fall back to her side. "Grandmother, please!" Emily had jumped out of the car and was running back toward the house, her shoes splashing through puddles. "Please don't make Jack go!" Margaret appeared in the doorway, her face drawn with worry and uncertainty. "Emily dear, come inside. We need time to sort this out." "But he didn't steal anything. You know he wouldn't." Emily's voice cracked. "He teaches me about helping people, about being kind. He fixed my bike and helped me with the charity booth and—" "Emily." Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. "Sometimes adults need time to think things through carefully. Come inside now. You'll catch cold." Jack stepped out of the car, rain dampening his shirt. "Emily, it's okay. Your grandmother's right. She needs time to look into everything." He knelt down to Emily's level, not caring that his knee was getting wet on the driveway. "Remember what we talked about? About doing the right thing, even when it's hard?" Emily nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Well, right now, the right thing is to be patient and trust that the truth will show itself." He managed a small smile. "I'll always care about you, kiddo. That won't change, no matter what happens." Emily threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him over. "Promise?" "Promise." Jack hugged her back, then gently pulled away. "Now, go on inside with your grandmother." Margaret's eyes met Jack's for a moment. There was something there, doubt, perhaps, or regret. But she said nothing as she guided Emily inside. Jack sat in his car for a long moment, watching the heavy wooden door close behind them. The rain was falling harder now, drumming against the roof of his car. He thought about the last few months, teaching Emily to change a tire, watching her and Sam work on homework together, seeing her proud smile when they counted the charity money from the street fair. How had it all gone so wrong? The drive home felt longer than usual. The streets were gray and empty, matching his mood. He pulled into his driveway, noticing how small and plain his house looked after spending so much time at the Wexler estate, but it was home, honest and true, like everything else in his life had been. Sam was waiting at the kitchen table, his math homework spread out in front of him. His face fell when he saw his father's expression. "Dad? What's wrong?" Jack sank into a chair, suddenly feeling very tired. "There's been a misunderstanding at the Wexlers. I won't be driving Emily anymore, at least for now." "What? Why not?" Sam's pencil clattered to the table. "Is Emily okay?" "She's upset, but she'll be all right." Jack ran a hand through his hair. Someone made it look like I took money from her charity booth. Her grandmother needs time to figure out what really happened." "But that's crazy. You would never steal anything." Sam's voice rose with indignation. "We have to tell them. They'll figure it out, son." Jack tried to sound more confident than he felt. "Sometimes all we can do is wait and trust that the truth will come out." Sam got up and started pulling pots and pans from the cupboard. "I'll make dinner tonight, Dad. Grilled cheese okay?" Jack felt a surge of love for his son, so young, but already knowing exactly what his father needed. "That sounds perfect, buddy." They ate their sandwiches in unusual silence, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows. The empty chair where Emily sometimes sat during their impromptu family dinners seemed to mock them. Sam pushed his crusts around his plate, lost in thought. The quiet wasn't just the absence of noise, it was the absence of Emily's laugh, her endless questions, her excited chatter about school or ballet or whatever new thing she'd learned that day. Even after such a short time, she'd become such a part of their lives that her absence felt like a physical thing, heavy and real in the air between them. Jack looked at the refrigerator. where Emily's drawing of the three of them holding hands was still stuck with a magnet. In the simple crayon lines, he could see all the hope and trust she'd placed in him. He'd promised to protect her happiness, and now he felt like he'd failed her. Sam followed his father's gaze to the drawing. "She'll be back, Dad. She needs us too much to stay away." Jack nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of sunshine from what had started as such a promising day. Jack sat at his kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of him. The morning sun cast long shadows through the window, but he barely noticed. His phone rang, breaking the silence. Margaret Wexler's name flashed on the screen. His hand trembled slightly as he answered. "Hello? Jack?" Margaret's voice sounded tired, strained. I need to tell you something about Emily." He sat up straighter, his heart racing. "Is she okay?" "No, she's not." Margaret's usual composure cracked. "She hasn't eaten since yesterday morning. She's refusing to attend her lessons. When the tutor arrived, she locked herself in her room." Jack closed his eyes, his chest tight with worry. "I'm so sorry to hear that." "She keeps asking for you," Margaret continued. "She won't believe what we found. She says you'd never steal." "Mrs. Wexler, Jack started, but she cut him off. "I'm not calling to discuss that. I don't know what to do. The doctor says she's physically fine, but emotionally." Her voice trailed off. Jack ran a hand through his hair, thinking of Emily's bright smile, now replaced by tears. "Maybe it's best if I stay away completely. I don't want to cause any more trouble for your family." "That's what Vanessa says too," Margaret replied, her tone uncertain. "But I've never seen Emily like this. Not even when her father left." The mention of Emily's father made Jack's heart ache even more. He thought of his own son, Sam, and how devastated he'd be if suddenly separated from someone he trusted. "Mrs. Wexler, please tell Emily." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tell her that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they stop caring." There was a long silence on the other end. "I will," Margaret finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. After hanging up, Jack sat motionless, feeling completely helpless. The garage would open in an hour, but he couldn't focus on work. Images of Emily kept flooding his mind. Her excited face when he'd help her with homework, her determination while setting up the charity booth, her tears when he had to say goodbye. Sam came downstairs, backpack slung over his shoulder. He took one look at his father and asked, "Was that about Emily?" Jack nodded. "She's having a rough time." "This isn't fair, Dad," Sam said, sitting down next to him. "Everyone knows you didn't steal anything. Emily knows it too." "Sometimes life isn't fair, buddy," Jack replied, putting an arm around his son's shoulders. "But we have to trust that the truth will come out eventually." "Can't we do something?" Sam asked, his voice small but determined. Jack shook his head. "Right now, the best thing we can do is pray for her and give the family space to figure things out." The day dragged by in a blur. Jack went through the motions at work, fixing cars and talking to customers, but his mind kept wandering to the Wexler estate. He wondered if Emily had eaten anything yet, if she'd come out of her room, if she was still crying. During his lunch break, he found himself parked near Emily's favorite ice cream shop, remembering how she'd always order strawberry with extra sprinkles. The simple memory nearly broke him. He'd grown to care for her like she was his own daughter, and now he couldn't even check if she was okay. When evening came, Jack closed up the garage early. He couldn't concentrate anyway. At home, he and Sam ate dinner in relative silence, both missing the occasional evenings when Emily would join them, filling the small house with her cheerful chatter. After Sam went to bed, Jack sat in his favorite armchair, the one Emily used to curl up in while reading stories. He bowed his head and began to pray, something he hadn't done properly since his wife passed away. "Lord," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "please watch over Emily. Give her peace and comfort when I can't be there for her. Help her understand that sometimes good people get hurt, but that doesn't mean they stop loving." He paused, wiping his eyes. "And please, if it's your will, Let the truth come to light, not for my sake, but for hers. She deserves to be happy, to feel secure, to trust in the good, in people." The house was quiet, except for the distant sound of crickets outside. Jack continued praying, letting all his worry and helplessness pour out. He prayed for Margaret, that she would find wisdom in handling the situation. He even prayed for Vanessa, knowing that her actions came from a place of fear and hurt. Finally, exhausted but somehow lighter, Jack headed to bed. As he passed Sam's room, he heard his son's voice quietly, adding his own prayers for Emily's safety and peace. In that moment, despite everything, Jack felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever happened next, he knew that the bonds of love and trust they'd built couldn't be erased by false accusations or misunderstandings. The early morning sun hadn't yet peeked over the horizon when Jack pulled up the garage door, ready to start another quiet day of work. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal gave him some comfort, though his heart still ached from everything that had happened. He'd barely slept these past few days, worried about Emily. The sound of running footsteps broke through the dawn silence. Then came the frantic knocking, desperate, urgent pounds against the side door of the garage. Jack's heart jumped. He rushed to open it, and there stood Emily, completely drenched from the morning drizzle. Her private school uniform was muddy at the knees, and her usually neat hair was windblown and wet. She clutched a manila folder to her chest, protecting it from the rain with her body. "Emily!" Jack exclaimed, immediately pulling her inside. "What are you doing here? How did you—" "I ran away," she said between heavy breaths. "I had to show you something important." Her hands trembled as she held out the folder. "It proves everything, Jack. It proves Mom lied." Jack quickly grabbed a clean shop towel from his workbench and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're freezing. Let me call your grandmother." "No." Emily grabbed his arm. "Please, you have to look first. Please." Her eyes were red from crying, but there was determination in them too. Jack knelt down to her level, just like he had that first rainy night at the bus stop. "Okay, sweetheart, show me." Emily opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were several papers, bank statements, receipts, and what looked like printed emails. "I was hiding in Mom's study last night when she was talking on the phone," she explained, her voice small but steady. She was laughing about how easy it was to trick Grandma with fake papers. Jack carefully took the documents, spreading them across his workbench. The first was a real bank statement showing all the charity money had been properly deposited. Next to it was the doctored version Vanessa had shown. Margaret, the differences were subtle but clear when compared side by side. "See?" Emily pointed to the dates. "Mom's friend at the bank helped her make the fake one." I heard her say so. She pulled out another paper and email chain between Vanessa and someone discussing how to handle the situation. Jack's throat felt tight as he read through the evidence. "Emily, how did you get these?" "Mom never logs out of her computer," Emily said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "And she leaves everything in folders on her desk. She thinks I'm too stupid to understand, but I'm not." Her voice cracked. "I'm not stupid. I saw what she did to you." Jack's heart broke at the pain in her voice. Here was this little girl, soaked and exhausted, who had risked so much just to prove his innocence. He remembered her words from that first night. "I wish you were my daddy," and felt the same protective surge he'd experienced then. "You're the furthest thing from stupid," Jack said softly. "You're one of the bravest, smartest people I know." Emily's lower lip trembled. "She said awful things about you on the phone. She said she had to protect the family name, but she's the one who's wrong." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "She's always wrong. She doesn't care about anyone but herself." "Listen to me," Jack said, putting his hands gently on her shoulders. "What your mother did wasn't right, but she's still your mother. Sometimes, grown-ups make terrible mistakes because they're scared or hurt. But it's not fair," Emily burst out. "She hurt you and Sam too. You're the only ones who ever really cared about me, not just about looking good in pictures or at parties." She was crying harder now, years of hurt pouring out. "You taught me how to fix my own bike, and you listen when I talk, and you never make me feel bad for asking questions. Why couldn't she be more like you? Jack couldn't hold back anymore. He pulled Emily into a tight hug, feeling her small body shake with sobs against his shoulder. She clutched at his work shirt, holding on, like she was afraid he'd disappear. "You're safe now," he whispered, his own voice rough with emotion. "I've got you, sweetheart. You're safe." They stayed like that for several long moments, the early morning light slowly filling the garage. Emily's sobs gradually quieted to hiccups, but she didn't let go of Jack's shirt. "We need to call your grandmother," Jack said gently, still holding her. "She must be worried sick." Emily nodded against his shoulder but didn't move. "Will you come with me, to show her everything?" "Of course I will," Jack assured her. "We'll figure this out together." Emily finally pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes but a glimmer of hope. "Promise?" "I promise," Jack said firmly, giving her shoulders a gentle squeeze. "No more running away though, okay? You scared me half to death." A tiny smile tugged at Emily's lips, the first he'd seen in days. "Sorry, but I had to be brave, like you taught me." Jack shook his head, amazed at this remarkable child who had burst into his life on another rainy night not so long ago. "You're already the bravest person I know," he said, and meant it with all his heart. Emily leaned into his side as he reached for the garage phone, still clutching her folder of evidence. She was wet, tired, and probably in a world of trouble, but she felt safer than she had in days. Jack's arm around her shoulders told her everything would be okay now, and for the first time in her life she completely believed it. Jack's old pickup truck rumbled through the quiet morning streets, windshield wipers fighting against the steady drizzle. Emily sat in the passenger seat, hugging the folder to her chest like a shield. Her clothes were still damp from her run to the garage, and Jack had wrapped his work jacket around her shoulders. "You sure about this, kiddo?" Jack asked softly, glancing at her as they approached the iron gates of the Wexler estate. Emily nodded, her chin set with determination despite her trembling hands. "Grandma needs to know the truth." The security guard recognized them and waved them through. As they pulled up to the mansion's entrance, Margaret was already waiting on the front steps, her usual composed demeanor replaced by visible worry. Her silver hair was slightly disheveled, and she wore a hastily thrown-on wool cardigan over her morning dress. "Emily!" Margaret rushed forward as Jack helped the girl from the truck. "We've been searching everywhere. I was about to call the police." "Grandma, please," Emily interrupted, her voice small but steady. "You need to see something important." Inside Margaret's study, the morning light filtered through heavy curtains, casting long shadows across the antique desk. Emily's wet shoes left small puddles on the expensive carpet, but for once, no one seemed to care about proper etiquette. Jack stood awkwardly by the door, unsure of his place in this family moment, but Emily grabbed his hand and pulled him closer. "Jack needs to be here too," she insisted. Margaret settled into her leather chair, adjusting her reading glasses as Emily spread the contents of the folder across the desk. There were printed emails, bank statements, and even photographs, all carefully collected by a child who'd been forced to grow up too fast. "I found these in Mom's study," Emily explained, her voice gaining strength. "She left her computer open last night. Look at this email," she told her friend how she was going to make Jack look bad. Margaret's hands shook slightly as she picked up the first document. It was an email chain between Vanessa and someone named Derek, discussing how to doctor the charity fair's financial records. The timestamps matched perfectly with the days leading up to Jack's dismissal. "And here," Emily continued, pointing to another paper, "she hired someone to spray paint Jack's garage. She wanted everyone to think he was bad." Jack's heart ached as he watched Emily present her case like a tiny lawyer, defending someone she believed in. Her faith in him had driven her to risk getting in trouble, to run through the rain, to stand up to the adults in her life. Margaret's face grew paler with each revelation. She examined bank transfers that proved Vanessa had orchestrated the whole scheme, down to paying cash to create false witnesses against Jack. She was jealous, Emily said quietly, tears finally breaking through her brave facade. She said Jack was taking her place, that everyone liked him better, but she never even tries to be here. "She doesn't come to my recitals or help with homework or," Just talk to me like Jack does." Margaret set down the papers and removed her glasses, pressing her fingers to her temples. The room fell silent, except for the tick of the ancient grandfather clock in the corner, and Emily's sniffling. "Jack," Margaret finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "I owe you an apology the size of that city block." She stood up, her shoulders straight despite the weight of her mistake. "I should have trusted my instincts about you. Should have questioned why Vanessa suddenly showed such interest in Emily's affairs. I let my fear of being wrong cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I hurt not only you but Emily as well." Jack shifted uncomfortably, not used to such formal apologies. "Mrs. Wexler, Margaret," she corrected him firmly. "After what my family has put you through, I think we're well past formalities." Emily looked between them anxiously, still clutching Jack's hand. "Does this mean Jack can come back?" Margaret walked around the desk and took Emily's other hand, creating a circle of connection between the three of them. "My dear, Jack never should have had to leave in the first place. And now we need to have a serious discussion about your mother." Jack felt Emily's grip tighten, and he squeezed back reassuringly. Whatever came next, he would be there to help this brave little girl who had fought so hard for the truth. The rain outside had finally stopped, and sunlight broke through the clouds, warming the study with golden morning light. Margaret reached for her phone. "I need to make some calls starting with my lawyer. Jack, would you and Emily mind waiting in the kitchen? Mrs. Chen always has fresh muffins ready this time of morning, and I believe you both could use some breakfast after all this excitement." As they headed toward the kitchen, Emily looked up at Jack with red-rimmed but hopeful eyes. "Are you really staying this time?" Jack ruffled her hair gently. "Try and stop me, kiddo." The morning sun cast long shadows across the Wexler estate's immaculate courtyard. News vans lined the curved driveway, their satellite dishes reaching toward the cloudless sky. Reporters and cameramen huddled near a hastily assembled podium, their equipment creating a forest of microphones and lenses. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his freshly pressed shirt, alone from Margaret's chauffeur. He stood off to the side, partially hidden behind a marble column. Emily refused to leave his side, her small hand wrapped tightly around his calloused fingers. "You don't have to watch if you don't want to," Jack whispered, noting how Emily's shoulders tensed at the sight of all the people. She shook her head firmly. "I want to stay with you. Always." Margaret Wexler emerged from the mansion's grand doors, her silver hair gleaming in the morning light. She walked with purpose, her spine straight and head held high. The whispers among the reporters died down as she approached the podium, adjusting the microphone with practiced ease. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I've called this press conference to address recent events concerning the Wexler family and to right a terrible wrong." Camera shutters clicked rapidly as Margaret paused, her eyes finding Jack in his hiding spot. She gave him a small, encouraging nod. "Last week, accusations were made against Jack Harmon, a man who has served our family with unwavering dedication and integrity. These accusations were false, deliberately fabricated to discredit a good man who has shown nothing but kindness to my granddaughter Emily." Jack felt Emily's grip tighten. He squeezed back gently, offering silent support. "Mr. Harmon first came into our lives on a rainy night when he found Emily alone at a bus stop. Instead of simply driving by, he stopped. Instead of calling authorities and washing his hands of the situation, he made sure she was warm, fed, and safe." Margaret's voice softened with emotion. That single act of kindness revealed more about his character than any background check ever could. The reporters scribbled frantically in their notepads. A few cameras swung toward Jack's position, but he stayed in the shadow of the column, focusing on Emily's steady presence beside him. "Unfortunately," Margaret continued, her tone hardening slightly, "there are those who saw his genuine care for Emily as a threat. My daughter, Vanessa Wexler, orchestrated a campaign to discredit Mr. Harmon, including falsified financial documents and deliberate sabotage." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Jack noticed several reporters reaching for their phones, likely calling in this unexpected development to their editors. Vanessa will be taking an indefinite leave from her positions within the Wexler companies to seek professional help. While I love my daughter deeply, I cannot and will not allow her actions to destroy the reputation of an innocent man or harm the emotional well-being of my granddaughter. Emily tugged at Jack's hand. "Grandmother's fixing everything," she whispered, hope blooming in her voice. Margaret squared her shoulders, her next words ringing with authority. "As of today, I am not only reinstating Jack Harmon to his position, but expanding his role within our family organization. His integrity, compassion, and dedication to Emily's welfare have proven him to be exactly the kind of person we need in our lives." The reporters erupted with questions, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of curiosity. Margaret raised her hand for silence. "Mr. Harmon's first project will be establishing a community youth program in conjunction with his automotive repair business. This program will teach valuable life skills to local children, continuing the legacy of kindness that brought him into our lives." Jack blinked rapidly, fighting back unexpected tears. He hadn't known about this part of Margaret's announcement. "But most importantly," Margaret's voice softened again, "I want to publicly thank Jack Harmon. Thank you for showing my granddaughter what true caring looks like. Thank you for standing firm in your principles even when faced with adversity. And thank you for being the kind of person who stops on a rainy night to help a scared little girl." Emily couldn't contain herself any longer. She pulled Jack toward the podium, her face beaming with pride. The cameras swiveled to capture their approach, flashes popping like summer lightning. Margaret stepped aside, making room for them both. Emily waved to the cameras, her other hand still firmly clasped in Jack's. The sight of their joined hands, his weathered and work-worn, hers small and trusting, seemed to capture the assembled press's attention more than any prepared statement could. The applause started slowly, beginning with a few reporters in the front row. It spread quickly, growing into a wave of approval that echoed across the courtyard. Even the usually stoic security staff joined in, their usual professional reserve cracking into genuine smiles. Emily bounced on her toes, grinning up at Jack with pure joy. The morning sun caught her hair, creating a golden halo that reminded Jack of angels. In that moment, surrounded by applause and wrapped in the warmth of acceptance, he saw not just Emily's happiness, but a future full of possibilities. The clapping continued, punctuated by calls for photos and questions from the press. But for Jack, the world had narrowed to the feeling of Emily's small hand in his, and the knowledge that sometimes the simplest act of kindness could change everything. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Margaret's study, casting long shadows across the antique Persian rug. Jack sat in one of the leather chairs, still processing the events of the morning's press conference. His name had been cleared, but something in Margaret's expression told him there was more to discuss. Margaret paced slowly near the fireplace, her elegant posture unchanged despite the emotional day. She stopped and turned to face Jack, her eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. "Jack," she began, her voice warm but serious, "what you've done for Emily goes far beyond any job description. You've given her something I failed to give my own daughter, a sense of real family, of being truly loved for who she is, not what she represents." Jack shifted in his chair, uncomfortable with praise. "Emily's a special girl. Anyone would have—" "No," Margaret cut in gently. "Not anyone would have done what you did. You stood by her even when it cost you. You protected her when others would have walked away." She moved to sit in the chair across from him. "That's why I want to offer you something more significant than being her driver." Jack leaned forward slightly, curious. "I'd like you to share legal guardianship of Emily with me," Margaret said carefully, watching his reaction. "Equal responsibility, equal say in her upbringing." The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Jack's mouth opened, but no words came out. "I know it's overwhelming," Margaret continued, "but Emily needs both of us. She needs your grounding influence, your understanding of the real world. And Sam." She smiled. "Well, those two have become inseparable, haven't they?" Jack found his voice. "Margaret, I don't know what to say. This is—" he ran a hand through his hair. "Are you sure? I mean, I'm just a mechanic." "You're not just anything, Jack Harmon," Margaret said firmly. "You're the man who saved my granddaughter twice, once from the rain and once from becoming like her mother." She reached across and patted his hand. "Think about it. Talk it over with Sam." As if on cue, laughter echoed from the hallway. The study door burst open as Emily and Sam tumbled in, still wearing their clothes from the press conference. "Grandma, can Sam stay for dinner?" Emily asked, then stopped short, noticing the serious atmosphere. "What's wrong?" Margaret smiled. "Nothing's wrong, dear. In fact, I was just asking your friend Jack here if he'd like to be more than just your driver." Emily's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Jack cleared his throat. "Well, your grandmother has asked if I'd like to help take care of you, officially, like a—" he hesitated. "Like a dad?" Emily whispered, hope lighting up her face. Sam stepped closer to his father, curious but cautious. "Dad? What does that mean exactly?" Jack turned to his son. "It means we'd be spending a lot more time here. It means Emily would be like—" he glanced at Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. "Like family." Sam's face broke into a huge grin. "Like a sister?" Emily bounced on her toes. "Really? Really, really?" Jack looked at their excited faces, then back to Margaret. The doubt that had initially flooded him began to fade. He thought of his late wife, how she always said everything happens for a reason. Maybe this was why he'd driven past that bus stop on that rainy night. "If you're all sure about this," Jack said slowly, "then yes, I'd be honored." Emily let out a squeal of delight and launched herself at Jack, nearly knocking him out of his chair. Sam joined the hug, laughing as they all almost toppled over. Margaret watched, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Well, I'd say that's settled then. We'll have the lawyers draw up the paperwork tomorrow." Emily pulled back, her face serious for a moment. "But I can still come to the garage sometimes, right? And Sam can still teach me about engines?" Jack chuckled. "Of course, that's what family does. We share our lives with each other." "And you'll still fix my bike when it breaks?" Emily asked. "I'll teach you how to fix it yourself," Jack promised. Sam grinned. "Yeah, and you can help us in the garage on weekends. Dad's the best teacher." Margaret stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Speaking of sharing lives, I believe we should celebrate. How about pizza? From that little place you two are always talking about?" "Tony's?" Emily and Sam said in unison, then burst into giggles. "The very one," Margaret said, reaching for her phone, "though I've never actually had pizza delivered to the estate before." Jack laughed. "First time for everything, right?" As Margaret placed the order, Jack watched Emily and Sam chattering excitedly about all the things they could do together now. His heart felt full, in a way it hadn't since before his wife passed away. Emily suddenly grew quiet and approached Jack, her expression serious. "Jack, is it okay if sometimes I call you Dad? Not all the time, but maybe sometimes?" Jack felt his throat tighten with emotion. He pulled her into another hug. "Whenever you want to, sweetheart. Whenever you're ready." Emily reached out and grabbed Sam's hand, pulling him into the hug, too. "We're a real family now," she declared, her voice muffled against Jack's shirt. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees lining Main Street as Jack stood in front of the empty storefront. His weathered hands were tucked into the pockets of his work jacket, and his eyes traced the faded lettering on the dusty windows. The space had been vacant for years, a relic of better economic times, but now it held the promise of something new. Sam stood beside him, his 11-year-old face bright with excitement. "It's huge, Dad!" he exclaimed, pressing his nose against the grimy glass. Emily bounced on her toes next to him, her blonde ponytail swinging with energy. "It sure is, buddy." Jack pulled out an old brass key from his pocket, the metal warm from being held tight in his palm all morning. Margaret had handed it to him just yesterday, along with a thick folder of renovation plans and permits. The lock clicked open with a satisfying clunk. The door creaked as Jack pushed it wide, revealing a cavernous space filled with dust motes dancing in the streams of sunlight. The concrete floor was solid but stained, and exposed brick walls showed patches where old shelving had once hung. Metal support beams stretched up to a high ceiling where industrial fans hung motionless. "It's perfect," Jack whispered, his voice catching slightly. This was more than just a building, it was a dream he'd carried since his own father had taught him his first repair in their home garage decades ago. Emily tugged at his sleeve. "Can we go in?" Her eyes were wide with wonder, and Jack couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. "Of course, sweetheart. Just watch your step, there's some debris around." The three of them ventured inside. Sam immediately ran to the back wall, where large garage doors would soon be installed. "We can work on cars here," he called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. Margaret's heels clicked on the concrete as she joined them, elegant as always in her tailored suit. "The contractor will be here tomorrow to start the renovations," she said, pulling out a set of blueprints. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of having some preliminary designs drawn up." Jack unrolled the papers on a dusty workbench someone had left behind. His breath caught as he saw what Margaret had envisioned. The space was divided into distinct areas: a professional garage with multiple bays, a classroom setup with workbenches for teaching, and even a small office area. "Margaret, this is—" Jack shook his head, overwhelmed. "This is more than I ever imagined." She squeezed his arm gently. "You've given Emily something priceless, a father figure who shows her the value of hard work and kindness. This is the least I can do in return." Emily wrapped her arms around Margaret's waist. "Can I learn to fix things too, Grandma?" "Of course, dear," Margaret laughed. "That's exactly what this place is for." Jack walked the perimeter of the space, his mind already filling it with equipment and supplies. He could see it all so clearly: teenagers learning basic car maintenance, kids building their first projects, families getting reliable repairs at fair prices. It would be more than just a shop, it would be a place of learning and community. The renovation crew arrived sooner than expected, their trucks pulling up outside with tools and materials. The foreman, a burly man named Mike, greeted them with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Wexler's given us strict instructions," he said, consulting his tablet. "We're to have this place ready in 6 weeks. New wiring, plumbing, ventilation, the works." Jack watched as workers began taking measurements and marking walls. Some were already unloading sheets of drywall and stacks of lumber. The empty space was suddenly alive with activity and purpose. Sam tugged at Jack's sleeve. "Dad, look!" He pointed to where a worker was sketching out the dimensions for the main service counter. "That's where we'll greet customers." "That's right, buddy." Jack ruffled his son's hair. "You'll be helping me run this place before you know it." Emily ran back and forth between the workers, asking questions about everything they were doing. Her natural curiosity made the crew smile, and they patiently explained their various tasks. Jack noticed how she paid special attention to the electrical work, her eyes following the complex patterns of wires. As the afternoon wore on, Margaret brought in lunch for everyone: huge submarine sandwiches and cold drinks. The workers gathered in what would become the classroom area, sharing stories and laughing together. "You know," Margaret said quietly to Jack, "I haven't seen the block this alive in years. This shop is going to change things around here." Jack nodded, watching as Sam showed Emily how to make paper airplanes out of the sandwich wrappers. "It's not just about repairs," he said. "It's about giving kids a chance to learn, to create something with their own hands." The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. By sunset, the space had already begun its transformation. New electrical boxes lined the walls, and the framework for interior walls stood like sculptures in the fading light. As the workers packed up their tools, Mike handed Jack a set of new keys. "For the upgraded locks we installed today," he explained. "Security system goes in tomorrow." Jack held the keys tight, their edges still sharp and unweathered. He watched as Sam and Emily played tag between the newly framed walls, their laughter echoing off the high ceiling. Finally, it was time to lock up. The kids bounded out to Margaret's waiting car, but Jack lingered for a moment at the door. Above him, workers had just finished mounting the temporary sign that would soon be replaced by proper neon. "Harmon, Son's Community Repair Shop." His fingers traced the words before he turned the key in the lock. The click echoed with finality, and Jack smiled, patting the door frame gently. Tomorrow would bring more changes, more progress toward this dream he'd never dared to voice aloud. But for now, this moment standing under the sign with his key in his hand felt like more than enough. The autumn breeze carried the sound of laughter and music down the street as Jack stood in front of his newly renovated shop. The red brick building gleamed in the morning sun, its windows sparkling clean and the fresh paint on the trim giving it new life. The Harmon Sons Community Repair Shop sign hung proudly above the door, its gold letters catching the light. People from all over town gathered on the sidewalk, creating a festive atmosphere. Folding tables lined the street, loaded with homemade cookies, sandwiches, and punch. Margaret had insisted on catering the event, but many neighbors brought dishes anyway, turning it into an impromptu block party. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he unlocked the front door. This wasn't just the opening of a repair shop, it was the beginning of something bigger. Sam stood beside him, practically bouncing with excitement, while Emily held his other hand, beaming up at him. "Ready?" Jack asked them both. "Ready," they replied in unison. The door swung open, and people streamed in, oohing and ahing at the transformation. Where there had once been empty space and dust, there were now neat workbenches, tool stations, and a classroom area, with chairs arranged in a semicircle. The walls were decorated with colorful posters showing basic repair techniques, and a corner was dedicated to bicycle maintenance. Sam immediately took charge of the bike area, his confidence growing as curious kids gathered around. "First thing you need to know," he said, holding up a wrench, "is the right tool for the job." The children leaned in, fascinated as Sam demonstrated how to adjust brake cables on an old mountain bike. Jack watched proudly as his son explained everything step by step, just as Jack had taught him. Sam's voice carried clearly across the shop. "Remember, you want it tight enough to stop, but not so tight it drags." Emily, meanwhile, had set up her own station near the front window. She'd convinced Margaret to let her organize an art corner where kids could design signs for the shop's walls. Paint bottles, brushes, and poster board covered a long table, and soon the area was filled with laughing children, creating colorful masterpieces. "Look, Mr. Harmon," a little girl called out, holding up her painting of a smiling wrench. "Can we hang it up?" "Of course we can," Jack replied, already reaching for the tape. "That's going right where everyone can see it." Throughout the morning, elderly residents from the neighborhood brought in small appliances needing repair. Jack sat at his main workbench, surrounded by toasters, coffee makers, and table lamps. He worked steadily, explaining what he was doing to anyone who showed interest. Mrs. Martinez watched in amazement as Jack fixed her ancient mixer, the one she'd received as a wedding gift 40 years ago. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, reaching for her purse. "Not a penny," Jack said, smiling. "That's what we're here for. Just promise you'll make those famous snickerdoodles of yours for our next community gathering." Tears welled up in Mrs. Martinez's eyes as she hugged him. "You're a blessing to this neighborhood, Jack Harmon." The morning turned to afternoon, and still people came. Margaret sat in a comfortable chair by the door, greeting everyone who entered. She looked more relaxed than Jack had ever seen her, chatting easily with folks from all walks of life. Around 3 o'clock, Emily disappeared into the back room. Jack noticed but was too busy helping an elderly gentleman with his radio to investigate. Sam caught his eye and grinned mysteriously, clearly in on whatever Emily was planning. A few minutes later, Emily emerged carrying something wrapped in cloth. She cleared her throat loudly, and the shop gradually fell quiet. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" she called out, her voice clear and confident. Jack set down his screwdriver and turned to face her. Emily's cheeks were pink with excitement as she continued. "When I first met Jack, I was lost and scared. But he didn't just help me that night. He showed me what it means to really care about people." She unwrapped the cloth, revealing a wooden plaque with carefully painted letters. Jack's vision blurred with tears as he read the words, "For the man who fixed more than just broken things." Colorful banners fluttered in the crisp October breeze as crowds filled the Wexler block for the autumn fair. The street had transformed since that rainy night months ago, now alive with the warmth of community and connection. Children darted between game booths, while parents chatted with neighbors they'd never known before. Jack brought everyone together. Jack stood near his repair shop, watching Sam demonstrate bike maintenance to a group of eager kids. His son had grown so much these past months, not just in height but in confidence. The sight of Sam patiently explaining how to oil a chain made Jack's chest swell with pride. "Ready for the ceremony?" Emily appeared at his side, wearing a blue dress that matched the autumn sky. Her stuffed rabbit, now sporting a fresh patch Jack had sewn on its ear, was tucked safely under her arm. "Almost," Jack replied, adjusting his tie. He still wasn't used to wearing one, but Margaret had insisted this was a special occasion. "Where's your grandmother?" "Making sure everything's perfect, as usual." Emily giggled, pointing toward the bus stop where Margaret directed workers in positioning chairs just so. The installation was hidden under a velvet cloth, building anticipation among the growing crowd. They walked together down the block, passing the various improvements Jack had helped implement over the past weeks. The old bookstore had a fresh coat of paint, and the bakery's new awning cast welcoming shade over outdoor tables. Even the cracked sidewalks had been repaired, making the whole street feel renewed. "Look!" Emily tugged his sleeve, pointing to a group of her classmates running a lemonade stand. "They're raising money for the children's hospital, just like we did." Jack smiled, remembering how that first charity booth had started a chain reaction of giving throughout the neighborhood. "You inspired them, kiddo." They reached the bus stop, where plastic chairs had been arranged in neat rows. The spot looked different now, cleaned up, with fresh landscaping and new benches, but Jack could still picture that rainy night when he'd first seen a small figure huddled there alone. Margaret waved them over, elegant as always in her cream-colored suit. "There you are." The photographer from the local paper just arrived. She straightened Jack's tie with grandmotherly affection. "Now remember, no crying during the speech." "No promises," Jack said with a chuckle, though his throat was already feeling tight. More people gathered as the ceremony's start time approached. Sam joined them, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. The mayor arrived, along with several prominent community members who had supported Jack's youth program. Even Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant brought a tray of her famous dumplings for after. At exactly noon, Margaret stepped up to the small podium. The crowd fell quiet, save for the rustle of autumn leaves dancing across the pavement. "Many of you know the story," she began, her voice clear and strong despite her age. "On a rainy night not so long ago, a man driving home from work saw a little girl alone at this very bus stop. He could have driven past, many probably did, but Jack Harmon stopped." Emily squeezed Jack's hand as Margaret continued. "That simple act of kindness did more than just help one child. It reminded our whole community what it means to truly care for each other. Since that night, I've watched this block transform. Not just the buildings and businesses, but the hearts of the people who live and work here." Margaret gestured to the covered installation. "Today, we dedicate this plaque not just to commemorate that night, but to inspire future acts of kindness that can change lives." Two workers carefully removed the velvet cloth, revealing a bronze plaque mounted on a stone pedestal. Sunlight caught the engraved words, "In honor of kindness that changes lives." Applause broke out as Margaret stepped back, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Emily bounced on her toes, beaming up at Jack with pure joy. He tried to maintain his composure, but the emotion of the moment caught in his throat. The mayor said a few words about community spirit, but Jack barely heard them. His mind was filled with memories. Emily's first whispered words in the diner, Sam teaching her to ride a bike, family dinners that grew to include Margaret, the day the repair shop opened, and countless small moments that had woven them all together into something precious and real. As the ceremony concluded and people began to mingle, Jack found himself standing before the plaque. The bronze surface reflected the afternoon sun, making the words shimmer. Emily's small hand found his again, holding tight. "Are you crying, Jack?" she asked softly. He wiped his eyes with his free hand, not bothering to deny it. "Happy tears, sweetheart." "Me too," she whispered, leaning against his side. They stood there together, watching the fair continue around them. Children played tag between the booths. Elderly neighbors shared stories on the new benches, and Sam's voice carried over from the repair shop where he was still teaching. The whole scene was alive with the kind of warmth that only comes from a community that truly cares for its own. Jack felt Emily's hand squeeze his just a little tighter, and his eyes misted over again as he looked down at the girl who had changed everything. The plaque might honor kindness, but to Jack it honored something even more important: the family they had built together, right here on this block. The street fair's cheerful commotion faded as evening settled over Willow Creek. Paper lanterns strung between lampposts cast warm pools of light across the sidewalks, and the autumn air carried the lingering scents of cotton candy and roasted nuts. Jack Harmon walked between his two children, Sam on his left, Emily on his right, their footsteps echoing in comfortable rhythm against the concrete. Emily swung their joined hands back and forth, still wearing the flower crown she'd made at the craft booth. "This was the best fair ever," she declared, her voice carrying that special kind of happiness that only comes after a perfect day. "Even better than the last one?" Sam asked, grinning at her from Jack's other side. His face was painted like a tiger's, though the orange and black stripes had started to smudge from a long day of helping younger kids at the repair shop demonstration. "Way better," Emily nodded firmly, "because this time we're really family." Jack squeezed both their hands, his heart full. The shop windows glowed invitingly as they passed, the bakery with its fresh bread cooling on racks, the bookstore where Emily now had her own reading nook, the antique store whose owner always saved special trinkets for Sam to try fixing. Each storefront held memories from the past few months, little moments that had woven them together more tightly than any legal document could. As they approached the bus stop, Emily suddenly slowed her steps. The new bronze plaque caught the streetlight, its polished surface gleaming. Without speaking, all three of them drifted toward it, drawn by the shared memory of that rainy night that had changed everything. "I can't believe it was right here," Emily said softly, reaching out to touch the cool metal. Her fingers traced the engraved words, "In honor of kindness that changes lives." Jack looked down at the concrete where he'd first seen her, a tiny figure clutching that stuffed rabbit, soaked to the skin and trying so hard to be brave. "You were so quiet that night," he remembered. "I was worried you wouldn't trust me enough to come get warm." "I was scared," Emily admitted, leaning against his side. "But you knelt down to my level, just like you always do with kids at the shop, and you had kind eyes." Sam moved closer too, completing their little circle. "Dad's good at knowing when people need help. Mom always said that was his superpower." Jack felt the familiar bittersweet ache at the mention of his late wife, but it was gentler now. She would have loved Emily, would have been so proud of how Sam had stepped into the role of big brother. Emily looked up at the street sign, then back at the plaque. "You know what?" she said thoughtfully. "I'm glad the bus never came that night." Jack chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Sometimes delays lead to the best destinations, kiddo. Like when your timing belt broke last month?" Sam added with a grin. "If we hadn't been stuck at the shop late fixing it, we wouldn't have been there when Mrs. Chen needed help with her grandson's wheelchair." "Exactly," Jack nodded. "Life has a funny way of putting us right where we need to be, even when it doesn't feel like it at the time." They stood there for a moment longer, the evening settling around them like a comfortable blanket. A few stars had begun to peek through the darkening sky, and the chestnuts trees lining the street rustled softly in the breeze. The sound of distant laughter and music from the fair's last hour drifted toward them, reminding Jack of how much life now filled the once quiet block. Emily tugged gently at his hand. "Can we walk home through the park? I want to see if the fountain lights are on." "Sure thing, sweetheart." Jack looked at both his children, marveling at how natural it felt now. This little family that had found each other in the most unexpected way. "Let's go home." They set off under the streetlights, their shadows stretching and merging on the sidewalk ahead. Sam started telling Emily about his plans for the youth mechanics program, his hands moving animatedly as he described the kid-sized tool sets he wanted to put together. Emily listened intently, already planning how she could help paint the storage boxes in bright colors. Jack walked beside them, taking in their easy chatter, the way they leaned toward each other when they laughed, how naturally they had become siblings. The fair's paper lanterns still glowed behind them, and ahead lay home, not just the house they shared, but the feeling of belonging they'd built together. The evening air grew cooler as they walked, carrying the promise of autumn. Emily's flower crown was slightly askew, Sam's face paint was definitely showing the day's wear, and Jack's own clothes still smelled faintly of motor oil from the demonstration. But they were together, a complete family, walking toward whatever tomorrow might bring. The sidewalk stretched before them, lined with possibilities. Every step took them further from that rainy night at the bus stop, yet somehow brought them closer to understanding just how perfect that imperfect moment had been. Their footsteps fell in sync, 3 hearts beating to the same rhythm, moving forward together under the gentle glow of the streetlights. They turned onto the path that led through the park, where the fountain's lights had indeed been turned on, sending sparkles of water dancing against the deepening dusk. The future lay ahead of them, wide open and full of promise, just waiting to be discovered together.